All right, everybody. Welcome to this space. We're going to be talking, of course, about the ongoing debate over Christ is King. Is it an anti-Semitic dog whistle? Should we be more careful as Christians about how we say this? Is this something that's only going to draw people away from the faith who might otherwise be converting? Let's talk about it. So I've sent out a bunch of requests for people to join. They should be trickling in as we speak. Try to get as good a mix of opinions as we could. I'm just going to put it out there. A lot of people who I did ask to join, who are of the belief that this is something that is, maybe more insensitive at the very least, if not outright anti-Semitic, they didn't seem inclined to actually come and give their opinions. So I'm not really quite sure what to make of that. This does in some ways remind me of the debate over microaggressions that we see from the left. The idea that it's not just the intent, or maybe we can try to view people's intent just based on, I don't know, vibes, I'm guessing, or their history of posts. So yeah, hopefully we can have a good amount of people in here. Joel, Carlin, Will, I think, Sovereign Bra, you guys are welcome to jump in at any point and give your perspective on this. Also, with me is Marie Oakes, who will be helping to co-host.
Well, thanks for having us up, Lauren. I mean, I would just like to start the space by stating clearly and unequivocally that Jesus Christ is King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and that is not anti-Semitic to say. But I would, if Joel or anybody else is interested, I would love to start the space with hearing the case as to why people think it is anti-Semitic to say.
Yeah. Hey everyone. Thanks for having me. This has been quite a wild weekend with the discourse the last few days. My mentions are a nightmare, but it's fun. I enjoy this stuff. I rubbed a few people the wrong way. I think with a few of the posts I made, just reacting to what I was seeing, the way that the phrase "Christ is King" was being used. But before I get into that, I guess I want to start by saying I agree. Christ is King is not anti-Semitic to say. It's one of the core tenets of our faith, and there should be nothing wrong with saying it. It's something that we should be able to say with confidence and with gratefulness to our Savior. I've said those words many times on Twitter myself over the years. And so I think it's something, by itself is nothing to be ashamed of, and it should not be seen as anti-Semitic. I want to, maybe if I will, set the tone. I'm going to skip out a little bit early here because I got to put the kiddos to bed. But I think it's, we're talking about Christ here. Let's set the tone by reading some of his words in Scripture here. A few verses that came to mind as I was thinking about this over the weekend. James 3 came to mind. Chapter 3 of James talks about the tongue, and I think it's fair to talk about the tongue as, social media being kind of a new technological extension of our tongue now. We can speak to so many people so easily. But chapter 3, verse 8 says, no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. With it we bless our Lord and Father, and with it we curse people who are made in the likeness of God. Curse people who are made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth come blessing and cursing. Matthew chapter 7, Jesus said this, and starting in verse 16, he said, "You will recognize them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? So every healthy tree bears good fruit, but the diseased tree bears bad fruit. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus you will recognize them by their fruits. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. On that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, cast out demons in your name, do many mighty works in your name? And I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. And I think the first point that I want to make is that when we're using the name of our Savior, it's something to be done very carefully. It's not something to be done flippantly. It's not a catchphrase. It's not a virtue signal. It's not a means of beating your chest and so that you can dunk on another person. And it shouldn't be coded language. Any of those uses to use Christ's name in that way, it's a grievous misuse of his name, and it's a violation of the third commandment. It's taking the Lord's name in vain. What I observed,
Joel, real quick before you continue, because I don't disagree with that point, but when you say when people are using it in this way, can you clarify exactly what you mean when you say in this way?
Yeah.
How do you see people using it?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my mentions, and you can go and look at kind of some of the things that I've tweeted out over the weekend and how people replied to them, but specifically saying Christ is king, you dirty Jew. Christ is king, you slimy Zionist. Sharing a picture of sharing an anti-Semitic meme with the words Christ is king over it. I don't want to get into the particulars of anti-Semitism and the Groypers and what Nick Fuentes are doing. It seems to be that Fuentes has kind of taken that phrase and used it as a bit of a rallying cry, and a lot of his followers on the internet do the same. I think one point that I made over the weekend was we shouldn't impugn anyone's motives who says Christ is king, because I think the vast majority of people who say Christ is king are doing so with complete sincerity, and without any intent to be hateful or to express their disdain for Jews or any other group of people. And so I think that that's important to state that. But when I say using Christ's name in that way, I'm referring specifically to the way kind of the Fuentes crowd has combined that phrase with expressing disdain for Jewish people.
Can I just jump right in here? Because I think it's important to have a definition of the term anti-Semitism as we're going into this discussion. And I want to be really upfront with everyone. I'm not a Christian. I'm not Jewish. I don't ascribe to any Abrahamic religion. I will say in my belief system, Christ is actually an ascended master. So he does play a spiritual role, but there are a lot of ascended masters in my belief system. So he's not any better or worse than anyone else. People can agree or disagree with that, whatever. I'm just stating my position on it. I come to this from a free speech angle in that I have been looking into the definition of anti-Semitism, particularly how it's being used and manipulated by the left, and also how it's being used and manipulated by the right. And what I'll tell you is that in the last couple months, I've been told I'm an anti-Semite if I don't agree with everything Israel does, if I question their targeting of the Palestinians in what I believe is an obvious genocide and a land grab. I'm anti-Semitic if I say anything a Jewish person doesn't like. And in this past week, I actually watched a presentation from an associate professor of Jewish studies at the University of California, Santa Cruz. His name is Dorian Bell. Dorian Bell said that it's anti-Semitic if you are against Black and brown immigration, even if those immigrants are not Jewish. He also said it's anti-Semitic if you are against critical theory and the Frankfurt School. So it really does seem as though there is a very broad definition of anti-Semitism right now. And it's one of those cases where if every single thing under the sun can be anti-Semitic, then literally anything can and the term loses its meaning. So I guess I would ask you, Joel, since this seems to be the position that you're taking, what is the definition of anti-Semitism?
Yeah, I want to make that definition as narrow as possible, because I agree with you. The left does the same thing with the word racism. We all have been called racist for ridiculous things, over the last several years. The left has completely butchered our language. Not being a scholar or good at definitions, I would just say in layman's terms, anti-Semitism is expressing overt hatred, disdain, or superiority to a Jewish person. I would say it's more individual to individual. I don't want to get into a debate about Zionism or criticizing the state of Israel. I think that's a different thing. But when it comes to the Jewish people, a person of Jewish descent, expressing disdain or hatred towards them is what I'd probably consider anti-Semitism.
So hang on, just to be really clear here, any expression of disdain towards any Jewish person is anti-Semitism, even if it doesn't have to do with them being Jewish, but is more based on their behaviors?
No, only if it's based on them being Jewish. Although I would say expressing disdain or hatred towards anyone for any reason is evil. I don't really make much of a distinction between the two. I mean, human beings find so many different reasons to hate each other. If we were all the same race, we'd still find reasons to hate each other. People in India have the caste system and hate each other over that. People just do that. That's human nature. And I consider it all the same thing.
So hey, hold on one second. You guys, if I may, I'd like to have a little bit of a back and forth with Joel on this, because we've interacted on the timeline over this subject. I'm a fellow Christian, and I see both sides of this conversation, and there are fair points that are being raised on both sides. So
wait, sorry, 1 second. I do want to introduce Andrew Meyer. He is here. He is Jewish. I don't just want this to be a bunch of people who are not Jewish talking about Jewish people. So, just want to put that out there. So Chase, feel free to include him in this if you have questions about anti-Semitism. I also just want to bring up, Joel, you mentioned Nick Fuentes specifically. I've had a lot of people, elephant in the room, saying, get Nick on. You want to hear his perspective. I understand no one is entitled to a debate with anybody else, but aren't you at all curious as to what Nick would have to say for himself about why he says Christ is king, what it means to him, and what his own intentions are? Is that something that we should,
I certainly am.
Yeah, because I was before Sovereign cut me off, I was going to ask Joel, because he brought up Nick Fuentes and, Nick Fuentes using Christ is king. Are you questioning, Nick's belief in Christ is king when he says that? So are you questioning his faith in that way?
Hey, Chase, are you going to talk more to Joel about his definition? Is that
Marie, let me jump in here, because I want to clarify your question here and really what the overarching debate is. Okay, so I'm observing this discourse, and here's what I see. There's a lot of Christians that are saying Christ is king, and they are saying so from a good place. There are also a lot of quote unquote Christians, or I don't even know if they're Christians. There's a lot of people who claim to be Christian, and they will say Christ is king. And Joel is correct that oftentimes they will use it kind of as a political bludgeon, and they will attach to it really nasty things that they're saying to Jews. They'll say Christ is king, you nasty Jew. They'll call Jews kikes. They'll just say really obviously hateful things. Okay. I personally, as a Christian, have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with people saying Christ is king. Andrew Clavon, one of the things that he brought up was how people would I think it was Andrew, how people would swarm Ben Shapiro's page with responses that Christ is king. I don't think that's anti-Semitic at all. I think the term anti-Semitism is completely abused in America. I think that it's expanded far beyond actual legitimate quote unquote hatred of Jews to people saying normal, true things that then get labeled anti-Semitic hatred of Jews. But the criticism that there are a lot of quote unquote Christians who are saying Christ is king and then calling Jews kikes or saying that they're nasty or slimy or whatever. Personally, as a Christian, I see that as a fair criticism. One of the reasons why I see that as a fair criticism, as Joel mentioned, is because the third commandment tells us not to take our Lord's name in vain. We're told in the scriptures that we will have to account on Judgment Day for every single idle word that we speak. Christ told us himself that we are condemned by the words that come from our own tongue. And, you know, as a Christian, I take that seriously, but I also take Christ's command to love our enemies seriously. Okay. Now, Joel, one of the fair points that you brought up, and I put this up in the nest, you brought up the point that it should be our goal as Christians to witness to others in a way that compels them to actually want to accept Christ. I agree with this. And if you know, groypers or whoever are sliding into the mentions of Jews and they're calling them kikes or whatever kind of language they're using, if they're obviously quote unquote hateful in their language, that's not going to compel anyone to want to accept Christ as king. And I think that's a fair point, Joel. However, what I will also say is that this concept of anti-Semitism, this idea, it is a label that has been used to shut down honest criticism of Jews, honest criticism of the way Jews use their power, honest criticism of Israel, you name it. I mean, the IHRA, their definition of anti-Semitism, one of the things that they've classified as anti-Semitic is claiming that Jews murdered Christ. That is not anti-Semitism. That is just straight up biblical history. I mean, Matthew 27, the Jews are yelling, "Crucify him," to Pilate, and they demand the release of Barabbas. And when Pilate tells them that they would be responsible, the Jewish Pharisees and the Jewish crowd that was there that was angry at Christ, when Pilate tells them, you know, that you will be responsible for his death, they explicitly said his blood will be on us and our descendants. Acts chapter 7, the first martyr of the Christian church, Stephen, when he's standing before the Jewish Sanhedrin and he walks them through the history of the Jewish people, he ends his testimony to the Jewish Sanhedrin by telling them, look, you guys murdered the prophets that foretold of Christ's coming, and you betrayed and murdered the righteous one, our Messiah, Jesus Christ. And it says right there in Acts chapter 7 that the Jewish Sanhedrin, they were furious at Stephen for saying this, and they started gnashing their teeth. And then God gives Stephen a vision, and he looks up in the heavens and he sees Christ standing at the right hand of the Father. And he says this to the Jewish Sanhedrin, and they murder him on the spot. It is biblical truth that Jews, the Jewish Pharisees, the Jews of the day, had Christ murdered. But now we live in this like political paradigm in America where anytime anybody leverages any legitimate criticism towards Jews that makes them look bad, you have this chorus of people calling it anti-Semitism. And it's created a real problem in our country. Because now people can't honestly criticize Jews. And if they do, they get their lives destroyed frequently. As we just saw with Candace Owens, you know, it's like, okay, she's leveraging criticism towards Jews. It's up to everybody to decide for themselves how much of it's true, how much of it isn't. But the fact that she was willing to do it has caused a ton of people to call for her firing. She's been called a vicious anti-Semite, all this kind of stuff. And it's dishonest. And the response to the dishonesty of these anti-Semitism accusations is anger on behalf of many Christians. And it's because nobody's willing to actually have an honest conversation about Jewish people, the way they use their power, Israel, so on and so forth. There is a lot of pent up anger towards the Jewish people. And you see this manifesting with groypers or whoever, you know, using quote unquote hateful language towards Jews. And until the thing that like I implore you, Joel, and the Jews in the space, Andrew, Connor, I think you're Jewish, Connor. You might be. Looks like
Connor is very Catholic.
Oh, okay, forgive me, Connor. Andrew, Joel, you know, any Jews who may be listening in the space, any Christian Zionists who don't like the quote unquote anti-Semitism that's going around. Like, the thing I would just tell all of you guys is, as long as right-wing organizations, legislators keep shutting down honest criticism of Jewish people, as long as that keeps getting shut down, this quote unquote anti-Semitic rage that you guys see in people's mentions, it will continue boiling and boiling and boiling and boiling. And that is a problem that will have to be dealt with. And, so those are my preliminary thoughts.
I'll give my closing thoughts, and then I'm gonna put the kids to bed here. I think that we probably have a slight difference, in outlook. When you talk about criticizing the Jews, that whole sentence kind of just is kind of lost on me, because when you say the Jews, it's such a blanket statement.
Let me clarify: powerful Jews, rabbinic Judaism, the state of Israel, not your average Jewish person who lives down the street.
Okay, well, see, that's where some clarification could be helpful. When you just talk about the Jews, that's not very helpful. I think it's important to be clear in our language, especially when we're mounting criticism against certain individuals, so that things can't be misconstrued. That's on us. It's important to be clear and concise, so that things can't be twisted. That's what the left loves to do. I think as far as anti-Semitism goes, I probably have a difference in opinion philosophically on that too. I think that it's something that's always existed. I think that, the Jews gave us Christ. The Jews gave us the scripture. The Jews gave us the Messiah who crushed the head of the snake, and Satan has had a vendetta against them ever since. He hates the Jews. And he hates all God's chosen people. So he hates the physical seed of Abraham, and he hates the spiritual children of Abraham, the Christians. And I think that there's something spiritual going on whenever you see anti-Semitism rearing its head. And there may be things out there that you can point to that this is why there's anti-Semitism rising. Look what the state of Israel is doing. Look what's happening in the media. There's always something that you can point to. There was something that you could point to in the middle of the 20th century. There were things that you could probably point to in the Middle Ages when the church was persecuting Jews. I really don't see that as being particularly meaningful, except that there's always been this vendetta that Satan has had against the descendants of Abraham.
Joel, may I add one thing to what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Respectfully, I don't disagree with the point that Jews in particular may be in Satan's crosshairs, but I think what a lot of us have a problem with is, okay, Jews have an extraordinary concentration of power in America. Talmudic Judaism in particular is straight up satanic. This is why Jesus called them the synagogue of Satan in Revelation chapter 2, verse 9, and Revelation chapter 3, verse 9. That's why he said,
well, everyone who's not in Christ is following Satan. I mean, whether you're talking about atheists, Islamists, there are different flavors of it. And anyone who is not in Christ is an enemy of Christ. And I don't think the Jews are special in that way. That it's like I said, there's different cultural and religious
clear. Are you
flavors.
saying that Jews are enemies of Christ because they are not in Christ?
Again, you say Jews, that makes no sense to me, because there are Messianic Jews who believe in Christ too. So,
come on. We're talking about people who follow Judaism. Like I don't think when we're talking about beliefs here that the go-to should be, you mean racial Jews. And by the way, Andrew, I would just at this point, bro, feel free to jump in.
No, I've been busy. I'm on the phone with the ADL. I'm having them shut it down right now. The stream is about to go off.
Well played.
Thank you very much. I don't think I delivered that well, but that's okay. That's still a good joke. Yeah, I don't think. Let's set some priors. I don't think saying Christ is King is anti-Semitic. Obviously, sounds like a basic expression of your faith. I listened to a Catholic friend of mine give a long dissertation today about the phrase, and basically, it's just a statement that Jesus is God. So, if you're a Christian, that seems like a very basic statement of the faith. Obviously, Fuentes is very clever, and he's very aggressive against Jews. And so using what's a basic expression of Christianity as something that like seems like a tactile weapon, and then getting people to react to that and say that now that's bad. That's incredibly gifted meme warfare. Nick is very smart for that because he got Ben
Kind of like
Shapiro
Satan,
and all
right?
these.
Like the prince of the power of the air. That's what Satan does.
Well, you're supposed to be wise as serpents, right? So yeah, he got Ben Shapiro to overreach. He got the ADL to overreach. So kudos to him for that. The ADL is evil. Ben Shapiro is a sellout and wants to hurt America. He's a very bad guy. So I don't have a problem with that. And to the point that was made earlier that if people aren't allowed to criticize Jews, it creates a lot of hatred. 100%. I think more conversations where you're able to air this out is better for everybody. So no, when I was saying shut it down, that's just a joke. I want more of this. I said to Owen Benjamin in a debate a few years ago that I don't want to be a sacred cow. I want all of this to be discussed. The laws that they're passing to try and make anti-Semitism against the law is ridiculous. Anybody that's in favor of that is against America, an enemy of America. And I'm an American. So I want free speech for everybody. You should be able to say whatever you want. And again, as far as the phrase Christ is King or Christ is Lord, if you're a Christian, you should be saying that. And I hope more Americans do say those things because I want America to be a Christian nation. I don't want this to be an atheist nation. If America becomes atheist like Europe, America will be destroyed like Europe is being destroyed. So much love to Christians. Thank you for having me in the space, and pass the mic.
I just want to say real quick that Joel mentioned that part of like his concern seems to be like a rise in anti-Semitism that we're seeing. I would argue the rise in anti-Semitism is directly related to the never like ending evolving definition of what anti-Semitism means, because if anyone can be anti-Semitic for saying anything that is remotely against Israel or any Jewish person ever, then of course there's going to be more instances of it.
100%. I mean, that's the thing, like the concept of, if I may real quick, Joel, the concept of anti-Semitism itself revolves around the idea that Jews have disproportionate power. They use it for their own gain. And, that you're not allowed to talk about it. And when people say this and then they get their bank accounts canceled or they get destroyed by the media or they get fired from their platforms, and then you see a chorus of Jews led by people like Rabbi Shmuley, calling for the firing and financial destruction of individuals like Candace Owens, like stuff like that is going to increase the definition of quote unquote anti-Semitism occurring. But I just want to say, Andrew, I really respect you being willing to have like an honest conversation about this, and to call a spade, because look, man, as a Christian, like, I'll just state it bluntly. I think Jews are abusing their power in America. I think a lot of it is against American interests and Christian interests. I think there's a lot of lying that's happening about it. I think we're being gaslit on a very, very massive scale. And I also think the fact that honest conversations are not being had about it outside of, this space and a number of honest commentators online. I think the fact that honest conversations aren't quote unquote allowed to be had about this increases the risk of serious like anti-Semitism that evolves into violence against Jewish people, which is what happens historically. I don't want to see that happen as a Christian. I don't want to see violence against Jewish people, but I think the more of these abuses of power that do happen, I think it increases the risk of that long term. And I think, in America, I think we're seeing the beginning of it. But the best way to let the pressure off the release valve is to have honest conversations about Judaism or Jewish power or whatever.
And
100% agree. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, really, I was just going to say that I feel like it would be wrong and almost gaslighting to say that for a lot of people saying it's just an expression of fact and, faith, nothing else. I think what we are seeing is a reaction to the fact that it is okay for Muslims to have a collective conscience and for them to act as a group in their own interests. We are seeing that it is okay for Jews to have a collective conscience, to act in their own interests. We're seeing this especially with the whole debate over what's happening in Gaza. There are a lot of Christians who feel alienated because they're not allowed to stand up for their own faith in the same way. So I'm not going to say like, oh, it's not, kind of linked to a broader movement that's happening right now, because I think for a lot of people it is their declaration that Christ is king. I'm going to be standing firm in my faith. I don't care what offends other people. Christ is king. And I feel like by people then on top of that saying that's anti-Semitism, it's almost reinforcing the idea that that's right. As a Christian, you can't have the same collective consciousness that these other faiths, these like other races might have.
Let me leave you all with something, and then I promise I'll go and you guys can discuss. But I think
no, Andrew, we want you to stay. Don't go.
I think Christianity is fundamentally different in the sense that the way our faith spreads and the way we win, the way we take over the world, is not the way other groups do it. Islam does it through conquest. Most other groups do it through conquest. Or exercises of power. C.S. Lewis called Christianity the good infection. It's something that spreads in the weirdest ways through the power of God and the Holy Spirit in ways that we never expect. When Jesus came, when he rode into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, his followers were expecting him to slit the throat of the emperor and become their new king. And instead he died and shed his blood for our sins. And I want to leave you. I'm going to read one last passage of scripture because God always says things better than I could. And then I'll leave you. But I think that this passage is really, really good for us in kind of helping us form our stances and the way we interact with people, especially online. I think we should remember, as we're all made in God's image, every single person that we interact with on the other end of the line is a person made in God's image. This is Philippians 2. This is about Christ and his kingship and how he treated his kingship. It says this: so if there is any encouragement in Christ, any comfort from love, any participation in the Spirit, any affection and sympathy, complete my joy by being of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord and of one mind. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look out not only for his own interests, but also for the interests of others. Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not account equality with God a thing to be grasped, but instead he emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God has highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name that is above every name, so that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Our faith spreads through humility, through love, and the laying down of our lives. I think that's something to remember as we look to our King and how he established his kingdom and how his kingdom has grown throughout the earth. It spreads in a very counterintuitive way. And then last thing I'll say is when it comes to sharing our faith with the Jewish people, obviously we want them to come to Christ. There's one YouTube channel I'd recommend to you. It's called One for Israel. And it's most of the videos are testimonies of Jewish people and how they found Christ. And I encourage you to watch a few of them, because you'll get some insight into a lot of the roadblocks, the stumbling blocks that people who are born Jewish face when it comes to Christianity, a lot of the misunderstandings they have about Christianity, a lot of the misconceptions they have about Christians just from limited interaction with them. It's really, really eye-opening. And I think especially this time right now, with a lot of the talk of anti-Semitism and a lot of the fights on Twitter, we have a golden opportunity to model our behavior after our King and humbly approach people who are lost, including Jewish people who are lost, to share our faith with them, to show them the truth, and that's all I'll leave you guys with. I think that's all I have to say.
So I just want to say, sorry, my app is glitchy. It shows that Joel, Andrew, and Sovereign Bra are all currently speaking. So Joel, I'm sorry, got mixed up with who's speaking. Definitely don't want you to leave either though. But I just feel like Christians are never told more to be humble than when they are professing their faith. And I definitely believe we need to be humble in our behavior and our actions, but we should be bold in our faith. And obviously Christ himself was meek, but he did not shrink down from discussing his own divinity, his own kingship to the Jewish leaders of that time. So we have exact parallels of what we should be doing. He did not shy away. He was not afraid of upsetting sensibilities. He proclaimed the truth boldly. And there is humility in understanding that we as believers, that doesn't mean we're better than non-believers. It means we are saved, unlike non-believers. But I just feel like
right.
issue for meekness. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm not anti-meekness, anti-humility, but I don't think when it comes to proclaiming the faith, that's where we should be focusing that.
Yeah,
well, I think Lauren, I think the point that Joel is getting at. One second, Josiah. The point that Joel is getting at.
Gotta let other people talk.
Yeah, I know, but I've only got a couple minutes, and there's some important things that need to be said here because this is a really, really important discussion for our culture. The point that Joel is getting at is that when directly interacting with Jews, I've seen the One for Israel channel, Joel, and I watched a video years ago of one of their ministers going and speaking to Jewish people in Israel about Isaiah chapter 53, which is one of the original Jewish scriptures that prophesies the coming of the Messiah. And you can see Christ, you can see his crucifixion, you can see his life clearly outlined right there prophetically in the scripture. And when interacting with Jews one-on-one, I agree that it's 100% important to approach them with love and humility and to make sure that Christ is reigning as king in our hearts when we're speaking to them. But also, with that said, we should not, Lauren, I agree, we should not shy away from boldly proclaiming that Christ is king. And look, as Stephen told the Jewish Sanhedrin, a lot of these people have stiff necks and hard hearts, and when Christ came upon people who had stiff necks and hard hearts in the Jewish community, he did not hesitate to tell them that they were of their father, the devil, and they were illegitimate children of Abraham, and that they were part of the synagogue of Satan, and it is important to call those things out. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's a good witness to lead with that right off the bat when you're interacting with a Jewish person. I think it's good to lead with love. But it is important to call out the falsehoods of Judaism from the Christian perspective, because it is a religion that is defined by its rejection of Christ. And that's an important truth that does need to be proclaimed. So I'll leave it at that.
Can I ask who was giving me kudos earlier? I want to continue that discussion real quick. My app is as glitchy as Lauren's. It shows that Lauren and Joel have been the only ones speaking. Who was giving me kudos earlier? Because I wanted to address something you said.
Chase.
Andrew, that's me, Sovereign Bra, Chase.
And was that you just saying about Judaism is defined by a rejection of Jesus?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. I'm going to have to just say Judaism is the Torah. The Torah predates Jesus. Jesus is
it's also the Talmud and the Midrash.
But the Torah itself is Judaism. Everything else is commentary, levels of understanding of the Torah. And somebody else said earlier, the Talmud is evil. I encourage anyone that thinks the Talmud is evil to go and read Pirkei Avot. Pirkei Avot is one of the most amazing sections in the Talmud. You'll read it and you'll be astounded. Like if you like Psalms, if you like anything quote unquote Old Testament, you'll enjoy Pirkei Avot. I think the Talmud gets a bad rap because there's some passages in it. There's one about Jesus that was a corruption that was added later. That's not my opinion, by the way. That's Moshe David Valley. He is the student of the Ramchal, Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, a great righteous, a great tzaddik, universally recognized by Orthodox Jews. Moshe David Valley said that there's a falsehood spread about Jesus. So that section in the Talmud about Jesus should never have been added. It's a corruption. And then the other thing about the Talmud, when you find these sections that look crazy, a lot of times there's a word in the Talmud that is not literal. So like people find these sections and they seem crazy, but like a discussion, and it's about a 3-year-old. No, it's not about a child. It's about the soul. So the Talmud looking crazy to you, it's because it's esoteric. It doesn't mean what it says on its face. And the sages of the Torah say it'd be better somebody wasn't born than they just take the Torah at face value. That's how important it is not to just look at things when you're studying Torah or levels of Torah study and thinking that it's all literal. So just want to clear that up, because it's very easy to look at the Talmud, some section, and go, what does this mean? It's crazy. It's not literal. And then the other thing I wanted to say, you were addressing me earlier, talking about how we're not allowed to have these conversations. That's on purpose, because the people doing evil, obviously, it's disproportionately Jews in the satanic cabal, the Rothschilds and the banking and the media. You know, I would say it's probably 50-50, these Satanists that descend from Jewish and Christian families. And so Jews are wildly disproportionate to have that number. But they use the everyday Jew. Someone said on the stream, their everyday Jew or the Jew next door, whatever. They use us as a human shield. And there's plenty of Jews that are tribal and they'll say nasty things in defense of Jews or whatever. But in general, the game plan for the ADL, which are the front group for these satanic cabal, is to use us as a human shield. So divide and conquer is not the way to go. Again, I applaud the people using the mimetic warfare aspect to get the overreach, but the whole thing of we're all against the Satanists. If you believe in God, if you love America, we're all on one side. So be a Christian, be a Jew, love God, but we're not divided unless we choose it. We don't need to have a needless division. And obviously there's a lot of Ben Shapiro's and Shmulis and sickos that profit in various ways from division or ego or power tripping. But we don't need to have division. We're all generally for God and against Satan if you love God and you love America. So I just want to leave with that.
Hey,
I just
real quick, can I just say, like, now that Joel has kind of run away, I think it's only fair that Standis be offered a mic to have the right of reply, and I think that that's definitely something I would
second that
support.
motion.
And I also want to say that I see Adam Green in the room. I also think that Adam Green would offer a really interesting perspective that no one else here is going to have. So if he wants, I would recommend that too.
Is that Adam King, like the Adam King show? Is that him?
No, Adam Green, completely different guy.
Adam Green, no more news. I second the motion to bring up Standis Owens as well.
All right, how do you guys? So this is obviously I mentioned Nick has been mentioned by name as using Christ as King as an anti-Semitic veil. And I just want to say in terms of Joel, he did before the space started let me know that he had to go early. I've invited him to cycle in and out as he pleases. He might pop up back, he might not. Would everybody here want to hear Nick's perspective? Because I also, Rick, recognize that there's a lot of people who are of the opposing viewpoint who are probably going to leave or might leave if he comes on. And it's hard enough, frankly, to get them to talk. So anyway, what do you guys think?
Nick basically created this discussion. You got to give him the mic.
Yeah, I agree.
All right.
Lauren, you'll need to either remove someone. You'll need to either remove someone from stage or add a co-host to add another person.
Okay, let me, so Adam King, I'd love to hear your perspective. Let me try to get Nick on.
You want me to give you my perspective? You want me to give you my perspective?
Did he cut out for anyone else?
Yeah, I don't hear him anymore. Yep. Don't hear him anymore. Yep.
Yeah, the app's acting.
Someone at X got the call to shut Adam down.
I was just thinking it. I'm not even kidding this time. I'm like, I wish Adam would get off. Thank God.
Hey, what's up, everybody?
Greetings.
Can you hear me?
We can
Loud
hear
and
you.
clear.
All right. Yeah, well, my name was mentioned by Joel, but he's didn't stick around, of course, which is interesting because he's got the most to say, and he has one tone on the timeline, very different tone on the space. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but on the timeline, he's saying, "Oh, if you say Jesus is king, you're going to hell," and you groypers are all anti-Semitic. Then he comes on the space and it's, "Oh, well, let me just read from the Bible because God could say it better than I could. Really? Give me a break." So, I mean, I'll bring the same energy on the timeline and on the voice chat. But, I mean, look, to just be plain, I mean, let's just say the elephant in the room. It is about forcing a contradiction between Christianity and Jews. At least it is for me. I say Christ is king. Well, the reason I started saying it, because I think I'm one of the first people, I mean, not to ever utter the words, but to say them in the dissident right space. We would go to these rallies or protests, and how I brought it up was to say, look, we need to say the name because there's power in the name. We know that politicians talk about God a lot, but that could really mean anything. When we say God, I mean, you could be a Freemason, you could be a perennialist, you could be a Jew, you could honestly even be an atheist or agnostic. So I started to say, look, the difference between groypers and everybody else is we are explicitly Christian. So we're not going to say, hey, God bless America. We're going to say, no, Jesus is the king of America. Jesus is the king of the world. And if you got a problem with that, you got to go somewhere else. So that's how that started. And that's where the Christ is king chant. I mean, it's so funny because, I mean, this is now like dominating the conversation. I feel like everyone knew just, a week ago, if you heard a Christ is king chant at a rally or a political thing, it's groypers. It's groypers that are doing that thing. Not to say that we own the phrase, but you understand. I think there's a big correlation there, which is why so many people are invoking groypers or me, or rather Nick Fuentes. I'm just a Candacelans fan club, but they'll invoke groypers or Fuentes when they're talking about Candacelans being canceled. So I say Christ is king because I believe it. It's true. It also distinguishes us from a kind of like Gnostic or perennial or an indifferentism. And that's something I want to point out. Contrary to what Andrew Meyer says, where he says, well, we all believe in God and Jews believe in the Old Testament. There is something about religious indifferentism, which is a problem, which is to say that, hey, you could be a Muslim, you could be a Jew, you could be a Christian, whatever, as long as you believe in God, as long as you're vaguely traditional. I have a big problem with that because I'm a Christian. We don't believe that it was anybody that came to save the world or that is God. We believe in a Trinitarian God. That's God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. And there are meaningful differences. And, people have pointed out the Talmud. And to be fair, I'm sure Adam Green, or rather Adam King, and Andrew Meyer know more about the Talmud than me. I haven't read it. It's massive. But it's a fundamentally different work than the gospel and the wisdom of the church fathers and the Catholic catechism and, all kinds of other Christian apologetic writing. And so I think, and anyway, I don't want to ramble too much. It's not my show, but the fundamental point I want to make is this. I think what a lot of people are afraid to say, and I'm not going to say it's anti-Semitic, what people are afraid to say and to own is that when you say Christ is king, it is an act of rebellion because we happen to have a conservative movement that is run by atheists and Jews and gay people. And I'm not saying that to be edgy, but that's true. And it's not to say that there aren't, some Christians and some Catholics in the mix, but a lot of them are Jews, disproportionately more of them. Same is true of the government. Same is true of media. It went, and it's so funny. It's people say this about like white genocide. If you say white genocide and you're white, they call you a racist. If you say white genocide but you're in favor of it, they're cheering it on. They're saying we can't wait for America to become minority white. I feel like it's the same thing with Jewish power. I got canceled 7 years ago for saying, Jews run the media, Jews run the government. Now it's like, it's almost like they talk past the sale where they're like, okay, well, Jews run the government, but that's not a problem because it came about in a totally fair way because they're high IQ or something like this. Anyway, we as conservatives, we as reactionaries, what we're reacting against is a secularization of society. We want to have a Christian government. That means Christian rules. That means Christian leaders, Christian lawmakers, media, Hollywood, Christian conservative movement. And it is exclusionary. That is at the exclusion of people that are not Christians, who are Jews. And, but we have to own that. Yeah, sorry, someone want to jump in?
Yeah, well, let's just ask you point blank, because this is what people are going to be tweeting about when they listen to this space. When you are saying to a Jewish person specifically, Christ is king, are you doing it in a hateful way, or is it is it an invitation? Because I don't think it's inherently anti-Semitic to illustrate that Christianity and Judaism are different religions and that Jewish people don't believe in Christ. I don't have a problem with that. I think a lot of people, they're asking, are you doing it to evangelize, or are you doing it to drive away? And that's something like they're assigning intent to you. So let's just ask you.
Well, there's also there's a third reason, is to just affirm Jesus's own words.
I mean, he just admitted that he's doing it like a little bit more than that.
Well, it's not, but it's a different thing to say it's about hate, because they say, well, you're saying it at Jews. You're saying it at Jews in a hateful way. I don't hate anybody. I'm branded a racist anti-Semite. I have friends of all different kinds. Laura Loomer's been a close friend of mine for years. And, there are genuine people that hate Jews for being Jews that attack me for that. And I've said on my show, well, some of my best friends are Jews. Some of the smartest people I know are Jews. And you have real people that actually have a deep prejudice for Jews on a racial basis that'll say, oh, look at what he said. He's still friends with Loomer. That means he's a shill. That means he's whatever. So no, I don't hate them. Like I said, for some of the people I respect the most, like Ron Unz, who I cite constantly, is Jewish. Disagree with him on a lot. I think he's a secular Jew. But we say Christ is king. First of all, we don't, Jews are, I think, a very narcissistic group, similar to Black people in America. Not everything's about them. Saying Christ is king, to Marie's point, is an affirmation that America is Christian. And I feel like, there's something going on here where Americans get together and they talk about the way America should be. And then these Jewish people come in and they say, well, what about Israel? Well, what about us? Well, what about Jewish people? And it's like, we can say Christ is king, and we can say that kind of stuff and say we would like to live in a Christian country without necessarily always having to be held hostage by these Jews. Do you understand how long of a shadow they cast over American life? Everybody is obsessed with the Holocaust and Israel and Hitler. I got canceled for various points in my career for saying I'm not loyal to Israel, or I don't hate Hitler. I'm not in favor of genocide or whatever, but I look at Hitler as a statesman. Hitler didn't kill my people or anything like that. So I don't own the same kind of trauma that Jews do about the Holocaust. But you get canceled for saying that in America. And that's bullshit. We need to let Americans get together and talk about who we are and what we want for our country without people that have dual allegiance. They don't even worship the same God as us. They're obsessed with the Holocaust. So that's really what it is. And I think that's the subtle tension here. And people want to say, oh, no, well, we're not trying to offend anybody. It's like, well, I actually don't give a shit about offending people. Christ is king. America's got to be Christian. So that, I don't know if that helps, but that's where I'm coming from.
I'm going to snatch the mic. There's so much there I want to respond to. First, I never had an issue ever with you galvanizing Christians, saying Christ is king, being fervently Christian. Even the idea of building an exclusionary Christian government, go for it. I don't have any issue with that whatsoever. No one that's not a Jew is going to agree with me, probably. I don't care. I'm just going to say, Jesus said for you to worship the name of the God of Abraham, that you call him God the Father. So whether we believe that Jesus is the Messiah who's a man, by the way, or whether we don't believe Jesus is God. We believe in God the Father, so we do believe in God. That you believe Jesus is also God. Oh, we still believe in God the Father, as do you. So if you want to say that we don't, fine. Agree to disagree. No problem with that. The number one issue I've had with you, Hitler is not a Christian. Hitler was a Satanist. He's in the Vril Society. He's a Satanist. You want to big up Christians all day, big up Jesus all day, go for it. Hitler was a Satanist. He was a mass murderer. No, the number's not 6 million. They inflated it. The real number is David Cole Stein, a Jew who was attacked by Jews for doing the research. The internal Nazi numbers are like 3.5 million. And I can post that tweet or whatever. David Cole Stein really took it on the chin from other Jews for looking into that. So Hitler, not a good guy, a Satanist, and you venerating him, that's the number one issue I've had with you. You want to big up Christians, Christ is king, Christ is Lord, say it all day. You want to build an exclusionary Christian government, go for it. I want America to be Christian. I love Christians. But if you want to venerate a Satanist, that's where I have an issue with you.
Yeah, well, I mean, as far as veneration, I mean, veneration has a very technical definition in Catholicism. I don't venerate Hitler. What I talk, to tell you the truth, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't know that much about Hitler. I'm not like a Hitler expert, okay? But what I have talked about on my show, if you've watched my content, I'm being straight up with you. I'm not bullshitting you. What I have talked about on my show regarding Hitler, whenever I'm asked about it, is this: the founding myth of post-war Western civilization is the Holocaust. We need to go there. We need to visit that to unpack why things are the way they are. You know, because you look at Trump. Trump is compared to Hitler. Why? Because he's charismatic, has a mass following. He's implicitly pro-white. You know, if I go out there and say, I want America to be white, what are they going to call me? A Nazi. If I go out there and say, you know, I think Jews shouldn't run the government, what are they going to call me? A Nazi. Why? Because Hitler was pro-white and Hitler rounded up the Jews, and Hitler was uniquely evil, like, as you say, because of, well, you say because of Satanist. Every other Jew would say because of the Holocaust. Now, you just said the Holocaust is inflated. If I say that, I get fucking destroyed. And I did. You know, that's what happened during Groyper War. We were asking Charlie Kirk, hey, you know, why do you in favor of mass migration? And he would say, oh, well, you're a Holocaust denier. You know, you made a joke about the Holocaust a year ago during a super chat portion. So it's like I say, there's this like gaslighting that goes on. It's like I said a moment ago where, you know, if I say Jews run the media, I get fired. Then I get in debate with a Jew like you and you say, well, Jews do run the media, but whatever. And it's like, dude, I got fired for that, you know, and same thing with the Holocaust stuff and the rest of it. So what I've always talked about with the Holocaust is that there's this never again mantra. And I think if you look at how we have a Jewish elite, there was a handoff in the 60s and 70s. You look at a lot of these neocons, so much of what is driving the affairs of the world is this never again. We can never allow the Europeans to mount any kind of state or any kind of empire where a Holocaust would be possible again. That's why we got to rip up the family. That's why we got to put white people down and have white guilt. That's why we got to have mass migration in all the countries to bury them in an avalanche of non-white people. And that's all under the premise. And, you know, you could go back to Karl Popper and the Open Society. They specifically say that we need to rip open the society so that there can never be another Hitler. So, you know, you can say, well, Hitler was bad because of the esoteric pagan stuff. And Alex Jones says the same shit to me too. But I told Alex Jones, I'm like, yeah, but that's not what everybody else says. That's not what the Jews say. That's not what the media says. That's not what the Holocaust Museum say. They say he killed 6 million Jews, and that's why we can't have white society.
You can't base your actions just on your enemy. They want to divide and conquer us. They set up the psyop. Okay, I want the Holocaust museums to be closed. I don't want everything in the Western world to be a referendum on World War II and the Holocaust. Believe me, I'm tired of that stuff. But at the same time, you can't just try and adopt what they set up as a boogeyman, because the boogeyman they set up was actually evil. And you can disclaim it if you want. And I'm not bringing this up as a dig. I'm not trying to go there. But there was a gentleman named Catboy Cammy, and your reasoning for why he was a good guy was that he watched this pro-Hitler documentary with you. So I don't know how much you know or don't know. I'm not necessarily going to take your word for it. But I'll tell you this: not a good guy. Even the fanboy commentary version of it is that he had people in camps. Oh, well, there's no more supplies. Let them all starve and work themselves to death. There's no version of that where he's not a mass murderer. And he is a Satanist. You can say, oh, Alex Jones said it to me. Read the
Can I
book.
just point out we've
Oy
had Nick
vey.
Fuentes on for like 20
He's a
minutes and we're
Satan.
already discussing whether Hitler was that bad. Okay,
Well,
can we
He attacked
refocus?
me. He attacked me first.
Can we refocus? We have Adam King here. He dropped out. He hasn't said anything. We are talking about Christ is King. Nick, really quick, I just want to say, when it comes to the Holocaust, I don't know why you don't take the approach of we need to move on instead of was it really that bad? Like Hitler was a bad guy. You say he's not that. He was a statesman. He could be both evil and a statesman. Most statesmen are. I don't understand why the focus is there of trying to minimize the Holocaust.
I'll tell you why it's that bad. Nick had influence over one of the most important men in America, Kanye West, Ye. And under Nick's stewardship, Ye derailed himself to the point where he lost billions in business. He would have been on the debate stage pulling Trump to the right, moving the Overton window to the right. Nick's stewardship of Ye, encouraging his...
I don't even know what you're talking about.
Oh, really? I don't know what I'm talking about. Give me a break.
If you want to go there, we can talk about Ye 24. But this is what Jews do. This is a conversation about Christ as King. And a Jew comes on, and within 5 minutes, it's, well, you sabotage Ye. Hitler's a Satanist, a Nazi this, a Nazi. This is what the
Nick,
fuck I'm
you
talking
brought
about.
up Hitler.
No, he brought up Hitler. He said,
no, you mentioned him first. 100%. You mentioned him first, though. She's right.
In the context of what our religion is Christianity, not Holocaustianity. And then he came in and said, well, you venerate Hitler and Hitler's a demon and all this shit. Okay. See, this is what I'm talking about. We need to be able as Americans and Christians to have conversations without Jews that come into every space and troll about so-and-so's a Nazi and the Holocaust is terrible.
I didn't call you a Nazi. I didn't call you a Nazi.
You literally said I venerate Hitler. I mean, give me a break. This is gaslighting. It's just so dishonest.
That doesn't make you a Nazi. I didn't.
Okay.
Please put on another drama show. I didn't call you a Nazi. I'm not saying that. You 100% have venerated him. It's a joke. I'm going to be Hitler 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. I'm not the guy that cries about the freaking Holocaust.
Right.
I want to close the Holocaust museums. You are venerating him all the time. You're a liar.
That
sounds very
Andrew, respectfully.
Guys. Okay, so we had a really productive conversation. Things are starting to get out of hand. We want to talk about Christ is King. All right, there's obviously want to bring Nick on because he was personally accused of some pretty terrible things. But this is a conversation that goes beyond Nick Fuentes, all right? This is about Christianity as a movement, as a belief. Can we say Christ is King? Are we offending people, all right? Adam, I want to bring you on. And, I'm not saying that other people can't talk at all, but let's refocus.
Let Michael go now.
I appreciate you having me on, Laura. And I just want to address one point that, it's actually, I think it's quite nice to see Nick on Twitter, actually, and hear his voice on this very public domain. And as a free speech absolutist, I think it's important that all ideas are not censored so that people could see who everybody is. Now, when Nick talks about making America a Christian nation, for somebody who suffered such brutal censorship and his free speech and his First Amendment rights being taken away, he's very quick to want to take away the First Amendment rights of others and make America an exclusively Christian exclusionary nation, which is not the will of the intenders.
When did he say he wants to take away your free speech?
Yeah, he didn't say he wants to take away your First Amendment, Adam. Stop it.
No, I'm saying that the First Amendment gives both freedom of religion and freedom of speech.
He didn't say he wants to stop your practice of religion either. He talked about serving in the government, Adam.
So he wants to amend. And Andrew, don't air your personal differences with me in an important space like
you're
this.
Like
Adam, come on, bro. Come on.
You're like Shmuley, Adam. You need to stop.
But to
Adam, respectfully, please be objective. What Standis Owens is saying is he's saying he wants Christian representation in government rather than a majority Jewish representation in government. That's very different from saying I want to eradicate Judaism from America, which is not what he said.
Well, neither of those.
Let the record show.
Let
the record show. Given the opportunity to eradicate Islam or Catholicism, you did say you would prefer to eradicate Catholicism. He never said he wants to eradicate Judaism. You did say that would be your preference, though.
The Bible says, "Thou shalt not put a stumbling block before the blind." So that whole scene with Gavin Prissy McInnes over there was really kind of like a very unfair thing that didn't adequately respect my what I brought to the table of that conversation. And as Lauren and you pointed out earlier, the importance of having conversations like this. I don't know anybody else who would rage quit in such a, when talking about stolen artifacts that the Vatican has in its catacombs. That was the subject matter we were discussing, and the rage quit led to this internet blow up, and the topic of discussion, which was highly intellectual, was lost. So I hardly give that credence. What Nick was saying just recently was he wants to make America an exclusively Christian. He specifically used the word exclusionary Christian nation. So all I want to point out, and whatever the will of the people is, but that would require an amendment to the First Amendment, which also guarantees his free speech, which people fight for, even if they don't think he's correct.
So I look, I'm going to be honest. It sounds like you're putting words in his mouth, because
Well,
what I
that's
heard
what I
him
want to
say is
ask him. Nick, do you want to make
what I heard him
America
say.
exclusionary? Do you want America to be an exclusionary Christian nation, or is it pluralistic where all faiths are welcome here? What does Nick think?
Why? I mean, Lauren's right. It shouldn't be all about me. But what I'm saying about Christ as King is this: the reason there is a tension is
Don't avoid the question.
I'm not. Well, I'll tell you. I don't think it
Just
should
let
be.
him speak.
I think that people should be allowed to practice other faiths in America. But it's not just about what I believe. What I'm saying is, when people say Christ is King, there's a tension, because we all know that, like when Candace Owens, for example, said it initially, she said, "You can't serve God in money. Christ is King." Shapiro took that as a slight. Why? Because he's like technically her boss. I mean, he says he isn't, but we all know he's the main flagship thing at the company. He's not a Christian. He said about Jesus that he's a rebel that got killed for his trouble. So we know that to say Christian nationalism, Christ is King, Christian government, it does chafe at the fact that we have something resembling de facto Jewish rule, something like this. And what I'm saying is that we need to put in place a kind of system where the laws are Christian, the legislators are Christian, the president's Christian, the media is Christian. Now, how do you do that? That's a question of administration and logistics. I think that people should be able to practice their religion, but the law of the land should be Christian. So anyway, and that's really the point, is like, people say, well, Jesus is king and all that, but we kind of have this liberal society where it's like, okay, well, Jesus can be king over there. You can go and make Jesus the king of your little town over there, or your little community. Everywhere else, it's going to be pornography. Everywhere else, it's going to be total liberalism, total progressivism. And, and this is something that, by the way, if you look at the history of the 20th century, there's just a big article about this in the Atlantic. This isn't just me saying this. There was a big article in the Atlantic a couple weeks ago about the golden age of American Jewry ending. And they talk about how, and this is just true, the biggest proponents of the Establishment Clause, which is separation of church and state, are Jews. It wasn't like that before the 20th century. You look at the history of Europe, if you look at the history of America, in Europe, there was no division, or hardly any, between church and state. Catholic Church and the state were very tightly connected. And then even the United States, where of course they are not Catholic, they did understand that the precondition for liberalism is Christianity. In other words, freedom doesn't work unless everybody's Christian. So now what we have is a society where it's freedom, but it's not Christian. The laws aren't Christian, the leaders aren't Christian, a lot of the people have apostatized, and that is why we're having a lot of problems. So when people go up and say, well, we want the religion of the state to be Christ is king and Jesus is king, a lot of Jews don't like that, because a lot of Jews understand that if there's a militant, fanatical, Christian kind of country, they will be seen as alien. They may be discriminated against. That's why I brought up the Holocaust. It's that never again mindset, that we have to make America safe for Jewry. And that means to make it as liberal, tolerant, diverse, multicultural as possible, because that is where they feel the most secure. In Israel, Jews are fascists. Netanyahu is like a strong man, religious leader. They have religious people in the government. It's a Jewish identitarian state, practically. That's the basis of citizenship. Chuck Schumer doesn't have a problem with that. Shapiro doesn't have a problem with that, and they support it. In America, they say, well, we don't give a damn about the browning of America. And the thing about America is it's totally liberal and you can be whatever you want. So, that just spells out this contradiction where it's really about what's best for their survival. They're putting their own interest, their own tribal survival, their own tribal interest before the interest of the country. It's better for this country to be Christian, but not for Jews.
Okay, so I want to.
I'll hop in here.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
I just want to. Michael, I want you to speak. I just want to. The question that I want to pose is that I have heard people say that Christ is King should not be used as such a rallying cry, as such a almost a slogan or mantra. Because how would we feel if Planned Parenthood decided to use Christ as King as their slogan? Is this even a Christian thing to be doing, using it in this way? Michael, can you answer as best you can?
Yeah, I'll try to take it in a little bit of a different direction. I'm a Jewish convert to Christianity, but I'm not a Messianic Jew. I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian and I'm an American, and those are my identities. That's what I am. And so I'm glad to hear people saying Christ is King. I think it's a good thing. Obviously, people can use it in spiteful ways, but so did Paul, when he was in prison in the book of Philippians, said, I'm glad to hear the name of Christ preached, even if it's used in the wrong way. And I think what people are scared of is Christians actually realizing, hey, it's okay to be a Christian and it's okay to live out your faith as a citizen of America. If you're a Christian, it should affect your entire worldview. It should affect the way you do every single thing. And that means if you get into the voting booth, you should vote as a Christian. If you get into civic office, you should rule in a way that's in accord with God's word to the best of your ability. When we're talking about Jews, it could be talking about a bloodline, and that would be me and Will both fall into that, but have converted to Christianity. Or you could be talking about the religion that rejected the Messiah and is now post the coming of their Messiah and very much defined by the rejection of Jesus. Now, not all of the Old Testament obviously doesn't do that. It's telling of the coming of the Messiah, but he has come. So a lot of the things Andrew said, I thought were fantastic. But what I will say is if you don't have the Son, you don't have the Father. I mean, that's central to the Christian message, 100%. You can't, if you change that, it's not Christianity. So I'm happy to have Andrew as a co-belligerent in as many ways as I can, but there's going to be who you worship is going to define who you are. And it's not whether you're going to worship someone or whether you're going to have a religion that influences your state. It's which one you're going to have. And I think it's good to have Americans saying Christ is King. What else do we want them to say? Now, if other people are using it wrong, whatever, it's good to see America having these conversations and people being bold about their faith. And I want to see people like Andrew and anyone else repent of their false religion and have the joy and peace and redemption and new life that they can have in Christ. But if he's a good dude and he's my neighbor and he's doing good stuff, that's fine. And sometimes we'll have this conversation. Sometimes we'll talk about, whatever. But so we can have people that we disagree with as neighbors and whatever, but we're going to have a government informed by religion one way or another. And right now it's by evil secularism. And people have to recognize that we don't have a choice. So we need to make one. And the choice to make is Christ is King.
Let's go.
Amen. Amen, Michael. I just want to jump in on that. Pastor Michael Foster, awesome. Like Michael, I'm also a converted Jew. Grew up Jewish. All four of my grandparents, both my parents are Jewish. Bar mitzvah, 10 Commandments in my Torah portion, Taglit, birthright Israel. Didn't celebrate Christmas growing up, so by almost all American standards, I'm a pretty super Jew, and I came to Christ about 3.5 years ago. I can't speak for how anybody else uses the phrase Christ is King, and by the way, Christ is King. So I can't speak for how anybody else uses it, but for me, it's a celebration. And to Michael's point about Christians learning to be comfortable and confident in their Christianity, I just think at the end of Matthew Matthew 28:19, go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them. I can't read the verse right now in front of me, but Christians are called to disciple the nations. And in America, we have the nations. And so this is what we're supposed to be doing as Christians. That is Christ's final command in Matthew. Take that seriously. And I also think back to First Chronicles and King David bringing the ark to Jerusalem, singing and dancing and celebrating his faith. And of course, David was the ancestor of Jesus. And I think between those two things, there's a model for how Christians can go about preaching their faith in the public square, celebrating their faith, celebrating deliverance. And it is the way, and Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. And we shouldn't be afraid to say that. And if we're talking about Christ as king as some form of like linguistic or dialectical weapon, right, which some people are using, which I agree is wrong. But I'd also like to point out that calling things anti-Semitic was a dialectical weapon that was used long before Christ as king was, quite effectively, I might add. So if we're talking about dialectical warfare, let's be honest about it and say that we're dealing with, two different sides of this. And so perhaps if we could agree that Christ as king should not be used as a dialectical form of war, we can also agree that anti-Semitic accusations, false accusations, inflated accusations of anti-Semitism also shouldn't be used as a form of dialectical warfare. Now, I don't necessarily see that happening, but if we want to, do equal weights and measures here, let's do that. And just real quick, I would like to say something about Hitler, who came up. You can read the book Nazi Ecology by Mark Musser. He's an American pastor. It's a 500-page book, very scholarly. Hitler was a bad guy. He was also a narcissist, a failure, and a fool. And if you read his own writings, you can read his words from the book Hitler's Table Talk, which are transcribed recordings of his conversation. But in Nazi Ecology, Mark Musser breaks down how the real ideology of the Nazis was not that they were Christian capitalists, which is kind of how we hear them described today. The Nazis were actually closer to green socialists. They were much closer to what we'd identify as green socialists. And so there's actually been a whole body of study in the ecological field, in the political green ecological field today, trying to distance themselves actively from Nazi green policies. But we don't have a good understanding of who the Nazis were and what they were actually trying to do. They were actually trying to establish a pure racial homeland and a pure racial attachment to their land. And so that sort of exists all throughout Nazism. And so I really encourage people to read that book. It definitely changed my worldview. So having a better understanding of who the Nazis were and what they really wanted would help us understand our modern world quite a bit better. I do agree with that, but we have to be really careful to take an honest look about who they were. And I mean, really honest, because I think that's being hidden from us today. So I appreciate the chance to speak. I appreciate so much of what people had to say. This is obviously an issue that brings up a lot of frustrations and a lot of anger. And I'm glad that we as a nation are finally having this conversation. So praise God. Thanks for having me on, and Christ is King.
Hey, can I just jump in as I think pretty much the only person here that's not a Christian or a Jew, and I'm not approaching this from a religious perspective. It's a little bit, and this is to answer the question that Lauren asked, it's a little bit shocking to me that no one is approaching this from just a basic free speech issue. Like, you ask like, oh, people are offended at the use of the term Christ is King. Well, so effing what? This is America. Like, the First Amendment does not protect you from being offended by what other people say and do. And so anyone should be allowed to say whatever they want, and if people are offended by it, they're responsible for their own actions. And I'll say, as someone who, I was a Democrat for 20 years, and 5 years ago I left the left after they took over my knitting community, and most people know the story about that. But like like the reason that I left the left in 2020 is because at that time the right was all saying like individual liberties, freedom of speech, and they were complaining about having their speech censored all the time. And then after Joe Biden got into office, it slowly but surely transformed into free speech for me, but not for thee. And it was like cancel culture has just been like getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse on the right. I look at someone like Dave Rubin, who I really admired. I considered him a friend in 2020. And like today, he's calling around people's jobs, trying to get them fired if they don't take the right position on Israel. Like, the dude literally made millions of dollars writing a book that was all about like, can't we just have civil conversations? And he was right when he said that. And now he's completely backtracked because of all of this. And you look around and you see this all over the conservative right, where there's more in, like, I'll tell you guys, I go undercover at leftist events. I go into their private spaces. The left is laughing at the right. The left doesn't consider the conservative right to be any sort of real opponent at all. They're actually more worried about the Democratic Party than they are about the right at all. They consider them to be their worst enemies if you go into like the far left and the socialist spaces. And so like the right is continuing to shoot itself in the foot in this goddamn infighting and circular firing squad. If you don't like what someone has to say, don't be friends with them. It's really that simple. But like when it's coming around to like calling people's jobs, trying to get them fired, trying to get them deplatformed, complaining endlessly online about what they're saying, then just go find new friends. It's not that hard.
Okay, so you're
Well,
mentioning
I want
Dave.
to jump in on that.
Sorry, you're mentioning Dave Rubin by name. He, of course, would be welcome to come in, respond to allegations that I don't think most of us are able to confirm or deny because we weren't part of whatever conversation may have had. I do want to say, though, that Candace Owens is going to Locals, which is the platform Dave Rubin founded, and he has said that she is welcome on there. But let's bring this back to cancel culture, because I think that's an interesting point, Carlin. It seems like the same people who in different situations might say cancel culture is bad, we don't do that, blah, blah, blah. When it comes to people saying Christ is king, they maybe are able or willing to, put a little bit of pressure on maybe outlets that host them, maybe people that would interview them, which kind of seems a lot like right-wing cancel culture. But Kat, I see you have your hand up if you want to weigh in.
Thank you. I actually have to run. I could speak earlier, but I really got to run. But if you are able to invite Inspiring Philosophy, he's listening. Hopefully, he's still able to speak. He does this for a living. Like, he has a YouTube channel. He would probably be able to say things better than I can. But thank you for the mic. A lot of what I wanted to say has actually been said. So I just got to get to my kids now. Thank you so much for the mic.
Sure, and sorry that we missed you. Will or Sovereign Buff, if you want to go for it.
Will, you can go ahead if you want.
Yeah, thanks, man. I just want to say one thing about the left laughing at the right. So I was also part of Occupy Wall Street at the time in San Francisco. I lived there for a year, so I kind of know a little bit about what goes on the left, at least the pre-woke left. And I think the discussion that the right is having right now is really important. Like, yes, it's grinding gears, it's throwing sparks, it's causing a lot of friction. But what we're seeing is actually, I would call it the apotheosis of Christless conservatism. We're seeing that Christless conservatism can't actually conserve anything at all. And so on the right, there's a battle going on for what will be the soul of conservatism. Will conservatism have a soul? So to some extent, yes, it's really frustrating to see. But to some extent, I think it's actually really productive that this battle happened now, because I think it will determine the future of American politics in some important ways.
Yeah, great points. Carlin, I want to riff on what you're talking about here with the principle of free speech, because to me, this is a really, really important part of the overarching discussion as a whole. When I look at an organization like the Daily Wire, it's like, okay, what's their purpose? Their purpose is to be the vanguard of conservative thought in America. That's what they're supposed to be. I look at them like Con Inc. I think the Daily Wire is basically the Israeli Wire at this point. I think that they serve to protect Israel first interests. One of the most obvious examples of how they're Israel first compared to genuinely America first is with all of the communication around this Christ is King thing and the anti-Semitism laws that are being passed in this country. I mentioned this at the beginning of the space. Over half the states in America have laws banning in some form or another, quote unquote, anti-Semitic speech. This is America. This is supposed to be America. We are supposed to have free speech in this country. Anti-BDS laws make it illegal in over half the states of America, as far as I understand, for businesses to boycott the state of Israel if they disagree with businesses, for example, or not businesses, if they disagree with Israel, for example, vaporizing unarmed non-combatants in Palestine. Like if they criticize that, if they boycott Israel, there's laws that are banning that in America. In South Dakota, we just had this law passed that makes it illegal for people to say that Jews killed Christ, according to the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. That is crazy to me. That's crazy. This is supposed to be America, where we have the First Amendment, which guarantees the right to peacefully exercise your religion and exercise your right to free speech, as long as it is not inciting violence towards any people, right? Okay, well, Nick brought up a fantastic term earlier in this conversation, which I think is hilarious and absolutely true, which is Holocaustianity, right? This is basically the national civic religion of America and much of Europe as well. Ever since World War II, you know, I did a Google Ngram search recently on the term Judeo-Christianity, because we have, here in America, we've been beat over the head by the conservative movement with this idea that America is a Judeo-Christian nation. It was founded on Judeo-Christian principles. This term didn't even exist in the lexicon until the mid-1940s, after the Holocaust, right? It's a lie that America was built on Judeo-Christian principles. It was built on Christian principles. The vast majority of the founders of this country were Christian. These facts, these historic facts, are important. But ever since the Holocaust, ever since, however many people died in it, whatever happened there, I don't know. It was bad, but ever since that event, now it is illegal for people in America to criticize Jews. If it isn't illegal, then you have the most powerful corporations and media companies and whoever, seek to destroy your life. And that's insane, man. This country, you are supposed to have free speech in this country. Jews are not exempt from criticism. Christians get criticized in America all day long by everyone. But if people criticize Jews, or they say, hey, you guys, despite being 2% of the population in America, have an extraordinary overrepresentation in media, government, banking, so on and so forth. If you say that, you are automatically labeled a Nazi who apparently must just want to genocide Jews, if you happen to notice those facts. And it's completely insane, man. And it as a Christian, the fact that states are making, again, basic biblical truths illegal to speak about, it's insane. And the fact of the matter is, a lot of this is pushed by Jewish people. Okay.
You're in California when you can hear crazy people in your speaker.
I know. I've got crackheads in the parking lot around me right now, dude. It's so over. This place is Sodom and Gomorrah. But I'll leave it there. It's just it's insane to me. And it's the last thing I'll say is, because of this dynamic, Jews are simultaneously the most powerful group of people in America, but also the most protected group of people in America. But for you to acknowledge either of these facts is considered quote unquote anti-Semitism. And it's retarded, dude. It's completely ridiculous. We all see through it. There needs to be honest conversations about it. And I salute Standis Owens for spearheading this conversation.
So no soup for Knowles. She's a new speaker. Let's bring her in. She's someone who's been tweeting about this from the perspective, correct me if I'm wrong, of a Christian who's not thinking that Christ is King is being utilized in a good faith way. So, we haven't heard that much of that perspective. I'd love to hear more of it.
Thanks. I appreciate you letting me speak, inviting me to speak. So the thing is, first of all, I would, even if I have said this and it implied this, I have never meant to say that the phrase and that Christ is King could ever be anti-Semitic in itself, because it's not. But I did I never like to say anything nice about Jeremy Boring, but him pointing out that, a shovel is never a tool for murder, but you can use it for murder, right? So it's just the fact that when you take something and you use it for your own means, yes, anything. I could say butter. Butter is anti-Semitic. Well, it's not. But if a community takes it on as their slogan, it doesn't matter what the word actually means. You can still look to the intent of what's going on. The other thing that I wanted to mention was, I think it's okay for individuals, Christians, to say, I don't like this speech. I think it's wrong. I think you're misusing Christ's name. And that is not the same as making something illegal. It should always be okay for a Christian to tell another Christian, I think what you're doing is wrong, and I think you have wrong intentions, and I need to call this out. And nobody should be equating that with making something illegal. That's my biggest point right now.
Yeah, I think though what Sovereign Bra was talking about is that in 35 states, they have adopted by executive action from the governor or the state legislature or other regulatory bodies the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which says, among other things, as Sovereign Bra or Chase said, that you can't say that Jews killed Jesus, which is in the Passion. You also can't say that Jews are loyal to Israel. You also can't say that Jews run the media. I mean, there's you could go on the website. There's like a dozen different schedules of items that you're not allowed to say, and this has been codified in the law in 35 states, which is more than just all the Republican states. And they've done that at the behest of the Israeli foreign minister, because it's the Israeli foreign minister that called upon various states to begin adopting anti-BDS legislation, adopt the IHRA definition. Even when Ben and Jerry's, I think there was some drama going on in the West Bank about one of their locations there. They called on the state of Florida to divest the Florida pension fund from Ben and Jerry's. And anyway, so, I think that's what they're talking about. And, but that just gets to the heart of the matter. I think anybody would say, like, if you take all these items individually, I think they'd be more sympathetic. What I mean by this is, if you go out there and say, we need to cut foreign aid or eradicate foreign aid, of which Israel is the largest beneficiary, of which Egypt and Jordan are the second and third largest beneficiaries, and they're basically paid off because they were the states that normalized with Israel. I think anybody would say, well, on the principle of America first, no foreign aid. And I think if you said, we need to get rid of these anti-Semitism definitions in the law, or, all that kind of stuff, I think many people would agree and say, and for the sake of free speech, we should get rid of these laws. But of course, all of these things proceed from one reality, and that's the aspect of it that nobody wants to talk about. Everybody wants to cut the crust off and nibble around the edges, but things like these speech laws, and by the way, they're worse in Europe. In Europe, it's illegal to say the Holocaust didn't happen. You get thrown in jail just for saying it. So this is a global phenomenon, and same thing with the foreign aid. Of course, it's not just the United States, but other NATO countries that send Israel all kinds of military support and support them in the United Nations and so on. It proceeds from the fundamental reality of Jewish power, which is that Jews globally, and it's not just the Israel lobby, it's not just the Zionists, but Jews globally are extremely networked. They enjoy immense power and privilege. And, so anytime that you say something like Christ is king, or, when you challenge these things like foreign aid or like the speech laws, it all proceeds from that fundamental reality. And I feel like nobody wants to acknowledge that. And this is to my point, where Christ is king then becomes problematic, I think, for a lot of them, is because, they want Christians to just kind of be meek and, as I was saying earlier, go over there. You can go and be a Christian over there. But the idea that Christianity would enjoy primacy or hegemony, that is what they find unacceptable. So when you say something like Christ is king, Christ is the ultimate sovereign, what you're saying is that, Jesus, the power of Jesus in the universe will have a practical effect on how things work in America. And that's what they don't like. They want you to be a Christian as long as liberalism is hegemonic. In other words, Christianity is something that is the private practice of individuals within the system, but the prevailing religion of the society will always be liberalism or communism, or, as Chase said, some type of Holocaustianity. And that's reflected in the kind of blasphemies that you can have, and I've said this on my show. It's like you can be a celebrity and you can go out and give Jesus a lap dance in a music video, and you could do a drag show in front of the crucifixion scene in I think it was San Diego in California. But if you go out there and say, during the Passion story, it says that Jews killed Jesus, well, that's considered anti-Semitic. And if you commit a crime believing that or saying that, that will modify the charges and elevate it to a hate crime, a felony. And so it's almost something like akin to a blasphemy law. And the same thing goes with the education. We took prayers out of school. We put the Holocaust in. You don't pray in school. We don't learn about the church in school. They even modified how we measure the time. They don't even say it's BC, before Christ, or Anno Domini. Now they say it's the common era. It's 2024 in the common era and before. But it's mandated by law in almost every American state that they teach a curriculum of the Holocaust. And, so these are all just examples of, all this is to say, because I'm not trying to say we should take issue with this little thing or that little thing. I'm saying these things can only be true. I mean, these are things that would prove that we don't live in a Christian society. That is not the hegemonic religion or the hegemonic philosophy, the organizing principle of the state. It's something else. It's something like liberalism tinged with, some preference for Jews. And I think that is reflective of the fact that Jews run our society. So when you say Christ is king, understandably, they don't like that. Because if Christ is king, then that means that in the King of Kings, then that means America ought to have a Christian king. And the Christian king has to answer to the church and has to answer to God. And that king is not going to be a Jewish person who, as Andrew and Adam said, they don't recognize the Son. They don't answer to the kingship of Jesus. So that therein lies the contradiction and the problem. That's why they're totally okay with conservatives who are these like doting Zionist evangelicals who say, I'm Christian, but I'm also pro-Israel, and I want to, and anti-Semitism should be illegal. Like, they want it to be that. They don't like when you get Christians. I think this is a reason why they have a problem with me. They don't like when Christians are on their feet, zealous, fanatical, screaming Christ is king, and absolutely meaning it in their heart of hearts. And as I don't know who it was earlier, I think he left, but somebody else said, if you believe in Jesus Christ, it changes everything about you, if you really believe. And secular people, atheists, don't understand that. They think it's just like another category of, your vague beliefs. Like, I believe in evolution, or I believe in, I don't know, I like McDonald's over Burger King, and I'm a Christian. But it totally changes your metaphysics. It totally changes everything about you. If it's sincere, it's truly transformative. Consequently, it's transformative of a country. If you believe that Christ is king, that you cannot go on believing in this business where, we would conceivably let a Muslim become the president. Like, if you believe Christ is king, you wouldn't say, yeah, well, it's a Muslim's turn to be president, or it's a Satanist's turn to be president, or and as well, if it's a Jew's turn to be president. You'd say, no, we ought to have Christian leaders. You're not going to get a virtuous society without Christian education, Christian laws, Christian leaders. It's the only way it can be. So that's the fundamental reality that all of this is orbiting. But I think nobody dares want to go there because that's the essence of coming for political power, to name it and challenge it. That's why this has so much drama attached to it.
Can I just jump in real quick and say, I want to bounce off something Noel Super Noel said, which is
and by the way, I just want to illustrate, I just want to highlight, she's gone. So she's left, really trying to make this space inclusive of all viewpoints. It's almost impossible when one side doesn't want to have the conversation, even though they're happy to tweet about it. So clearly they're thinking about it, but they don't actually want to speak with people who disagree with them. And so I don't want to hear anyone after the fact complaining like, oh, well, you did it. Like, we're trying to include you. You don't want to talk.
Yeah. So, and what I want to say about what she said is not necessarily all that critical of her, but it's just like the point that she hit on was that definitions don't matter if it's being used in like a trolly or antagonistic way. And I'm just like, I just have to really push back on that. I'm sorry. Definitions of words do matter. And I think part of the reason we're even having this conversation right now is because of the slippery slope of the ever evolving definition of what anti-Semitism is. If we go back to, again, like when I left the left in 2020, the big thing then is that everyone was being called a racist for every single thing. Every single thing was racist. Cereal was racist. Milk was racist. Dogs were racist. Trees were racist. There was like all these articles about everything under the sun being racist. Well, the term racist lost its definition because all of a sudden you could be called a racist for absolutely anything. Fast forward a couple of years, now you can be called a transphobe, not if you actually hate trans people or don't want trans people to exist, but you can be called a transphobe if you don't want to date a trans person, if you don't want to sleep with a trans person, if you don't want kids under 18 being medicalized and transed by the schools and indoctrinated to think that they're genders that they're not. All of that is now considered transphobia. You look at even the term like groomer. I'll give you one from the right. The term groomer has been completely overused so that it doesn't actually respond to just indoctrination of children into this absurd gender ideology. They're using it to define to basically push against anyone who might disagree with some of the absurd things that, I'm sorry, I know people disagree with me, but that conservatives are pushing in schools that's really no different than the left. Like, I'm not in favor of banning books, and so I get called a groomer for that. Well, that has nothing to do with grooming children. And I think the same thing is true of anti-Semitism. If we can't be specific about what the definitions are, and if the definition always changes when you need to insult your political enemy, then ultimately the definition is going to get watered down, and then it doesn't really matter at all.
You know, if I may, on that note of being watered down, I love Carlin, I believe it is, how you were asking, you know, hey, how come nobody here is talking about the First Amendment? How come nobody here is talking about free speech rights? And this is something that has occurred in the church, is that our faith has been subverted. Our faith has been watered down. You know, I didn't have a chance earlier to interject when Joel Berry was speaking, but he was really personifying this phenomenon where we only get one side of Jesus. We get the side of let's love everybody. We get the side of let's have peace. Let's have unity. Where is the side of to bring a sword? Following him, begging him to deliver her daughter from a demon, and he calls her a dog. Where is the side of Jesus where, you know, even his own disciples, he says, unless you eat of my flesh and drink of my blood, you have disciples, and he says, are you going to leave too? And I believe, and I could be wrong, but I believe this is where some of that question from Carlin, I hope I'm saying your name right, is coming from, is the church has been placed under a spell. It has been stupefied. It has been placed in a chokehold like a viper, that we're constantly asking the question. And I love Lauren that you're asking this question, and also, and I understand the purpose of the space, but the church itself is always asking, did I say this just right? I hope I didn't offend anybody. I hope I didn't hurt anybody's feelings. Is this anti-Semitic? But we're not asking the question, does it please Jesus Christ, our King and our God? We're not asking that question. And I would just like to make the point that the Bible tells us that all scripture is God breathed and useful for teaching, correcting, rebuking, that the man of God may be thoroughly equipped for every good work. And if we're going to be afraid of upsetting individuals because we say harsh things, because we might call someone a name, because we might interject something, God forbid, with an ounce of testosterone that might actually threaten our enemies, an ounce of holy fire that might actually put fear in Satan's bowels, then we're going to have to throw away the entire book of Titus. Paul tells Titus, listen, Titus, I put you in a place called Crete, and I put you here to set things in order and to establish elders here. And then he begins to talk about the people from Crete. And he says, they're all lazy. They're all drunkards. They're all brutes. Their own prophets say this, and it's true. Therefore, rebuke them and warn them not to give into Jewish fables. We are forgetting that our apostle Paul cursed a sorcerer with blindness and called him a son of the devil because he was trying to keep a governor of an island from believing the gospel. And this is why people who are not Christians, they look at us like we are idiots. They look at us and they wonder, why are you sitting here pandering about whether or not your enemies like what you're saying? And I know it comes from a heart of wanting to please the Lord. We don't want to be too harsh. We want to be loving. We want all people to be saved and come to know Jesus. Yes, we do. But the Lord said to scatter seed. And if it's good ground, that seed will grow. And sometimes that seed includes rebukes. Sometimes that seed includes standing up for what is right. Jesus Christ said, let little children come to me, and anybody who messes with one of these children, it would be better for a millstone to be hung around his neck than what I'm going to do to him. That same Jesus that said, let the little children come, is the same one that is going to come back and judge the nations with fire, and hit the blood of his enemies is going to be up to the mouth of horses for miles and miles. So the question should not be, is saying Christ is king anti-Semitic? We should be anti anything that is anti-Christ. He said, either you are for me or you are against me. That is what we should be.
Sorry, Lawson. I just wanted
Amen
to,
to that,
you
bro.
reminded me of something else I wanted to say there, and I'll be super quick about it. I don't agree with any of what Lawson just said. I'll be very blunt. But guess what?
Hey.
He has the right to say it. This is America. It doesn't offend me when people like Lawson say what they want to say, or people like Nick say what they want to say. It doesn't offend me that anyone's saying Christ is king, even though I don't believe it. And I don't know why that we can't just go back to this place where, like, you're allowed to have your beliefs. You're allowed to express your ideas. You're allowed to advocate for what you believe in. I'll be honest, like, I've been hurt by a lot of people on the conservative right, people like associated with organizations I'm not going to name, but that all adhere to one major religion, and they've all hurt me and my career and my life far more than someone like Nick ever has. Like, and Nick has flat out said that if he ever came to power, or his ideas ever came to power, like, probably not so good things would happen to people who have beliefs like I do. But guess what? He's never hurt me, but a lot of people who are on the Christ is king is anti-Semitic bandwagon have. I don't know why we can't just all come to agreement that, like, we're allowed to disagree. That's part of the premise of this country. People are allowed to advocate for their ideas. Everyone needs to grow a little bit of a thicker skin and just learn to be in the same room with people who have different ideas than you.
Yes, I agree. I would like to personally hear from one of the Jews in the room, either Adam or Boxing MD, who has their hands up.
I'm back. Don't let Adam talk. No schmooly tonight, Adam.
This guy wants to air his personal grievances.
No, it's not personal, bro.
Adam, I want to hear you go.
Hardly a voice of the Torah, Andrew Mayer. But if you
no
want,
schmooly tonight, bro. Go ahead, Sovereign.
The truth is I would like to address Chase's point earlier about free speech laws and banning anti-Semitic speech. To the lady who just spoke, she's spot on. It's America. You know, we don't have to like what each other thinks about each other, but we have to be able to say it. And one thing, Chase, that always bugs me out about when these people like DeSantis and they go to Israel and they do these like overtly like unnecessary gestures to promote laws that are against the inherent nature of our country. I always wonder, like, who's doing that stuff, because it doesn't do me any favors. It doesn't do the Torah likes free environments. The Torah wants freedom of speech and freedom of the press. The Torah wants to know, I'll tell you, when I was growing up, they used to do KKK rallies where they would go in the streets, and that should be allowed. This is America. You should be able to express yourself however you'd like. And to get back to the Christ is King stuff, I actually have, I don't like banning anything, any type of speech whatsoever. I think it's very counterintuitive to the ideals of our country. And I think that the Christ is King stuff, a lot of people have been really, made really great points about like the intentionality behind each Christ is King mention. And I have a cousin who actually converted to Christianity. And every single Sunday, she leaves church fired up because she was dancing and singing and praising. And her Facebook is Christ is King, Christ is King, Christ is King. That is a good thing. She's been inspired by, and somebody mentioned earlier that they say that word in a celebratory environment, in a celebratory way. The opposite, which also shouldn't be banned, is the throwing of Christ is King into the face of a non-believer, as if that's going to somehow even make us more of a believer.
Wait, did you
Now,
just say you
I
think
like to
that should
point
be
out one
banned?
thing. No, God forbid. God forbid. I'm saying that, like, I really enjoyed Joel in the beginning of this conversation. And he said, I wish he stayed because he was so spot on with so many different things. But one of the things that he was saying was, like, he wants to, like, if you're trying to go out there and convert Jews, like, by going into a Jew's face and hurling that into a Jew's face, isn't going to work. And I'm not here to give anybody pointers on how to proselytize or anything like that, but it's counterintuitive to the nature of bringing people in. In Hebrew, it's called kiruv. It's like this aspect of shepherding the flock. And one thing that and so it's very important that we keep these spaces going where people could speak their minds and say whatever they want to say. And where laws, Chase, you were talking about the law in North Dakota. I think it's funny that in these states where they get so crazy about banning anti-Semitism and banning boycotting of Israel and stuff like that, there's like no Jews that live in these places. Very few Jews live in these places. So it's like this, I don't know why, but it's like this act of like fidelity from like a Christian evangelicalism that like really goes too far. It's against the nature of our country, which is the basis of how we can all collectively get along with each other and form a more perfect union, so that we could keep the border secure and keep the country intact and the way that it is. I think that Christianity has been a very strong influence in this country, and to say that Jews are the controlling force of the country, I don't think is by far intellectually honest at all. America is 72% white.
Well, Adam, can I respond to that?
Christian.
Can I respond to that specific
Yeah,
claim real quick? So, like,
sure.
when I see, for example, do you mind muting your mic real quick? There's a lot of background noise.
Yeah.
So when I see, for example, all of these politicians go and kiss the Wailing Wall and make these like overt grand gestures towards the Jewish people to show how much of a friend, how much of a philo-Semite they are, or when I see, Kirsty Noem pass anti-Semitism laws when she's got like 200 Jews or 300 Jews total living in her state. When I see that stuff happening, I mean, to me, it just looks like I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but I'm imagining its powerful Jewish interests are like shutting it down. You know what I mean? And
Yeah, well, I'll tell you that like there's some players in there, and they're not omnipotent. Like Matt Brooks is with his Republican Jewish Coalition thing. They're like very statist, like establishment, and they're not religious by far in nature. And this isn't to blow to the RJC, the Republican Jewish Coalition, because there's a lot of people on their board that are really America First patriots. But there's like that's like the only real voice of real Jewish money inside of politics on the right. And it's a significant amount of money too. It's not small, it's not large, but there is a collectivity that it's not even close to the level of of influence that the Koch brothers have onto the Republican Party. So I think it's important to understand that Jews do play they have a big chunk, but it's not the lion's share of conservative dollars that are being spent. And in the Democrat, on the leftist side, there is a lot of Jews there too, but there's also a lot of like Hollywood celebrities and major donors on the left side. And the Jewish influence, I think, is overproported. Like, for instance, like when George Soros does something anti-American, the Jews are at fault. When somebody on the right does, like Kristi Noem does something anti-American, like ban anti-Semitic speech or something like that, like DeSantis did, that is also like this. It's as if like these people, and they're not, because and the truth is I've been very close to all this Jewish money, and I know it personally, and I know that it has limitations. It's not unlimited banks. These are hard-working businessmen who created fortunes out of nothing and want to influence politics for free market capitalism and conservative values. Matt Brooks sometimes gets a little bit crazy. We've been talking. He's said he's come on my show. He's not. He like hokey pokeys on the show all the time. But I'll tell you from firsthand knowledge of him, his super PAC plays a very limited role. They don't even have deep enough pockets to go into every single race. But they do go into races like in Minnesota. They were like really in Minnesota for a while, and they're strategic. They're not national. Like it's so easy to just blanket and say the Jews have this influence and the Jews have that influence. But from a Jewish power perspective, somebody who sits in the realm of Jewish power and understands its capabilities and limitations, I could attest that it's not true.
Adam, are you claiming that one guy that you know is the only Jew giving money on the right?
I have relationships with about 20 Jewish billionaires at least. To say that this is who are on the right, to say that this is one Jewish voice of money
Jewish consigliere. You know what I mean?
Is a mistake. You know, but the point that I'm trying to make is that the Jews have an overrepresentation in what people think are capable. To understand those two and understand
the argument you're making makes it seem like you're obfuscating. It's so bad. I wish you would never do a space again.
You know, I really hate that your personal differences against
it's not
me
personal. Your arguments are bad. You make terrible
you
arguments.
want any reason to attack. You want any reason to attack something that I say, and Miriam Adelson doesn't give a fraction amount of shit that Sheldon did to the Republican Party while he was alive. She wants all the money to herself. I don't think that she's a beneficent force in America. She's a institutional status. I've met her several times, not many times.
Adam, hold on one second. I hear everything you're saying, and I appreciate you saying it. I saw Mr. Standis Owens throwing up some laughing emojis, and I would like to hear a clinical breakdown, a clinical response from him if he's willing.
Well, yeah, and I think Andrew was kind of. I think someone's still. Can you do your mic, Adam?
Real quick.
Thanks. You got a little feedback. Yeah, I think Andrew is criticizing Adam because, I mean, this is kind of a knowingly obtuse argument. I mean,
you guys can disagree all you want, but let's keep it. We're doing a pretty good job. Let's keep it civil. Let's keep it constructive.
Well, I think I'm being civil, but I'm saying that I think it's sort of knowingly dishonest to say that the Republican Jewish coalition is the only source of Jewish money in politics or in right-wing politics. As Andrew pointed out, you do have the Adelson family, in addition to many other donors. You also have, just look at the media landscape. After Candace Owens got fired, New York Post ran a hit piece hitting her on the way out saying, oh, she got fired after she endorsed a theory about Jews drinking Christian blood. New York Post is owned by News Corp, which is owned by Murdoch's. Murdoch share their condo in London with Netanyahu. And we know that Fox News is totally mobbed up like that. New York Post is like that. PragerU, the CEO of PragerU, was in the Israeli intelligence and the IDF. And it's run by Dennis Prager, who happens to be, by the way, in favor of pornography. He says that it's not a sin to masturbate. It's not a sin to watch porn. Then you got Breitbart, famous article, Breitbart, born in America, conceived in Israel. Beautiful picture of Netanyahu with Jim Hoft, who now runs Gateway Pundit, with Andrew Breitbart himself. Then you got Daily Wire, which is Shapiro and Andrew Klavan. And that's on the media side. There's other stuff on the money side. So, I mean, to the point, to say that the RJC is the only one wielding power is just not true. And I think what Chase is saying is that a state like South Dakota, they pass an anti-Semitism law. They hardly have a Jewish population. And in case it needs to be said, the point there is that obviously that didn't come from a particular need for that kind of law. It came from an extraordinary lobbying pressure. If 300 people can get a law passed to protect them, that obviously shows a sort of pull. I think clearly those kinds of laws are passed to satisfy some kind of moneyed backer, to satisfy some kind of influencing element. But you also get into like the neocons. The George W. Bush administration was the most pro-Israel administration in history. Trump's was maybe second. Under Bush, you have all the neocons like Wolfowitz and Pearl and Douglas Faith, who are the architects of the Iraq War. So, I mean, this stuff is endless. I mean, we're even Roger Hertog is another one. I mean, try and find one of these modern parts of the new right now that are not attached to Peter Thiel and Yoram Hazony through the Shalem Center, or that are not attached to Roger Hertog through the Tikva Fund, or a constellation of other types of groups. People have no idea. Like, it is such an interconnected web, and it's so dense and so complicated. And I think that's a big part of how they're able to obscure it, because it's not intelligible to your average person. Like, I last year started this big campaign against Bronze Age Pervert, who is a good example of like a new right guy. Bronze Age Pervert is an immigrant from Romania. He's Jewish. He was mentored by neocons like David Sidorsky at Columbia. David Sidorsky published some big manifesto for the American Jewish Committee in the 70s. It was published by Basic Books. Basic Books was founded by a Jew who worked for the first ambassador to Israel by the United States. But this is just like stuff without even Yoram Hazony, who runs National Conservatism, is a dual citizen. He gets funded by Peter Thiel. Both him and Peter Thiel's student newspapers were funded by Irving Kristol, a Jewish neocon in the 80s and 90s. Yoram Hazony trained Bari Weiss at the Shalem Center in Israel. She was one of the first interns they taught how to write op-eds. Bari Weiss was hired as an intern by Bret Stephens when he left where? Israel, writing for the Jerusalem Post to go to the Wall Street Journal. And then he took her with him to the New York Times, where they both answered to a Jewish neocon editor. So it's like, I mean, where do you want to start? Where do you want to? It's everywhere. It's so interconnected. And once you start digging, you just find more and more and more of it. So that I think that's what, and I wasn't trying to be not civil, but what Andrew is saying is that if you are Jewish, or if you're an apologist, or you're trying to argue for some kind of collaboration between Christians and Jews, you can't make an argument that like Jews don't have immense power in politics. Self-defeating premise, because it's obviously not. I think that's where he was coming from on that.
Yes,
So
100%. I agree with everything Nick just said. That's exactly what my point to Adam was. I'll take it a step further, except that it's not personal, Adam, but you making a point like that. Listen to what Nick just said. Everything he said was factual. When you make a point that bad, and Nick can then come in and bomb your awful point, it makes everybody look bad. That's why I was saying you're acting like Shmuley. Making points that bad makes people dislike
You've
us.
been waiting for this moment.
I don't care about you like that, bro. I want you to stop making us look bad.
Walked off the stage. I'll tell you the truth is that, like I said to Chase, there is a significant amount of Jewish money. But it's not the whole. If you look at the actual dollars that are being spent, you see that Jewish money is not even the majority of money on conservative politics. Jews have a cultural affinity to, they don't like being in the spotlight. So when you have organizations, like they don't like having.
What are you talking about, Jews? Come on, man. Listen, I don't even know who you are.
When you have an organ, I'll explain to you. When Jews put money into political campaigns, like they don't really set there's policy that's created with the interests of people that give dollars, but there's so much that actually comes from like Christian enthusiasm. Like Kristi Noem's legislation, I don't think it was 300 Jews that lobbied together and pushed it on her.
Adam,
I think that it was her devotion to what she believed it was her devotion that she believes is her Christian duty to
Yeah, but you're
protect Jews.
saying
Like
this
she
is the thing.
feels that.
Hold on, Adam.
I don't
Adam,
think
gotta
that it
stop
was
this.
lobbying
Bro, there's
that
no
created
way
that
it
more
was
than
her
her own
Christian
faith.
devotion.
You're
She's got like
yapping.
300 Jews, and South Dakotans are chill people, bro. Like,
Yeah, listen,
No,
Adam.
okay, Chase,
This is
I
the
will
problem that I
disagree
have
with you
this.
there. There is a large number of evangelical Christians who absolutely will go as hard for Israel as actual Jewish people. 100%.
no,
I see it all the time.
Lauren, I agree with that. But my point being, like, okay, if you've got a bunch of Zionist evangelical Christians, it's not like anti-Semitism is going to be a problem in an environment like that. So why do you even need the laws?
Right.
Well, hold on. Lauren, do you mind if I say something? First off, I don't know who you are, Adam, and I have the same problems that Andrew has with you, and I'm also Jewish. So it's not personal. You're just your arguments. When you
No,
say
the thing
that
with
Jews,
Andrew is
talk,
something that takes place out of the public
Let me talk.
domain. It's a private conflict that we've
That's
been
a
having
lie.
for 2
Total
months.
lie.
I don't give a
It's
shit.
not a
Total
lie.
lie.
It's not a lie. But I respect you. Whatever.
No, my
whatever
problem is with your horrible statement publicly when you were debating Nick and you said you'd eradicate Catholicism if you had a choice. Horrible thing to say. That's a thing you said publicly. That's not private. And then
people
you
ask.
publicly slandered me when I said
People
it was a
asked me
bad
what I
statement.
felt. I
Neither
gave them
of
an
that is
honest
private.
answer. You couldn't take my.
Relax. Let's reset and get back to topic.
If anything, I want to put this out.
Yeah, here, Jewish box and India. Yeah. My point is, first off, Adam, this kind of actually blends into my point exactly. Is I like, and I feel this way when you said Shmuley, and this is the problem, the difficulty that Jews have is that it's tough. Like this Shmuley guy will hurt Jews more than anything Candace Owens or Nick Fuentes could do when he's representative. Literally, if Hitler or any fucking anti-Semitic person wanted to draw an anti-Semite, it would be fucking Shmuley. I go after these people so fucking hard. They double down, they triple down with zero optical awareness about the reaction. And I will be a little critical on certain people who I intentionally know that they use them as cannon fodder, but whatever. Everybody's trying to make a living. I get it. But the problem that I have is that it becomes difficult in an environment where sometimes it's like not enough to attack them, and it's not enough to attack them, and you're not attacking them enough to my likings, and that comes from all sides. So it becomes a very difficult situation. And my issue again, the ADL with the Christ is King. Of course, it's not anti-Semitic; it's a belief, for sure. But I will say, on just like somebody mentioned earlier, when you put the Star of David, like what is the heist, the fucking immigration thing? They put the Star of David. You can't criticize them from the right or from the left because they're subversing America with illegal immigration. But it's the same thing where in certain cases you put on the shield when you say Christ is King because it is a religious belief, and then you could say certain things that not even as anti-Semitic, but just may just have anything else behind it, and then you can't criticize it because it's a religious belief. And the last thing I do want to push back on is that although these laws, which I disagree with by nature, I disagree on an individual level that somehow Jews are the most like protected people in America. If you want to be honest, the most protected people in America, I have this like little pyramid in my head. It's trans people, then black women. And you get like Jews can get criticized 100% on their behavior. It exists 100%. Maybe not as like the whole Jewy, the JQ, the Jewish conspiracy theory, but like the force field behind the trans and then the black women. Just look at the cases with Trump. These women, this one could go out and buy cash and drink Grey Goose, and like she's a powerful queen. Like the Jews don't have that level of power. There's different power we could talk about, but what I'm saying is it's just a little different, I think, than some people frame it. That's all.
Well, I would push back on that. Just on that last point, I see that Jeremy Boring is actually in this space. So hello, Jeremy. This is a perfect example. Daily Wire produced and financed a major, well, maybe not very major, but something major for the right wing, a motion picture about trannies in sports. And the whole premise of the movie is making fun of trannies. And I think everybody makes fun of trannies. I think there's very famous fighters that make fun of trannies. There's rappers that hate trannies, talk about killing trannies who don't disclose the fact that they are trans. I think we all know that. We also know that there could not be a major motion picture that would mock Jews in the same way. And we know that when
Nick, have you
rappers
seen the
mock
movie
Jews,
Airplane? No,
when
Nick. Come on.
you're talking about a 45-year-old movie? No, I haven't seen that.
Well, I'm just saying.
Well, I mean, let's
let me
just
finish my point.
compare. I mean, Dave Chappelle, he is on Netflix. He makes fun of trans people all the time. Kanye West was deplatformed basically from banking entertainment in general. So I'm not saying trans people aren't protected, but I don't think it's the same level of institutional backing.
100%. Yeah. So I just wanted to push back on that. And look, and I want to say this because I think this is a very important point. When I say these things, a lot of people say, well, why do you bring it up? Why do you want to count all the Jews that are in power? Why do you want to talk about how many Jewish people are influential and why they're the most protected group? And why do you want to interrogate the legacy of the Holocaust and these kinds of things? They say, well, you must want to harm Jews, or you must hate them or discriminate against them. It's like I said at the beginning. I think that Jews must recognize that this is a country that was founded by and built by white Christians, and there needs to be a proper deference for that. I think that's appropriate, especially for many of them, because they're pro-Israel. I look at a guy like Yoram Hazony, and I said this to him on my last account. Yoram Hazony is a dual citizen. He was born in Israel. He's a Jewish Zionist. He runs a group called National Conservatism. And I look at a guy like that and I ask myself, what is a guy like this running a group called National Conservatism? You weren't born here. You live in another country. Your citizenship is another country. Your allegiance is to another country. And yet you come to America and say, I'm going to run the Nationalist America Conference. That's obviously inappropriate. And where is the self-consciousness? Where's the self-possession to say, this is not my place? And maybe I can support it, and maybe I could be a cheerleader, and maybe we can say that, as he does, there's a virtue in nationalism for Israelis and for Americans. But I think the problem is that a lot of these people, their primary allegiance is not America. I think they don't identify with most Americans because, as we know, Jews are a very insular community. I think that's actually a strong suit. When I was working for Ye, we talked about that. He said they're very race loyal. He would say, why aren't Black people race loyal like that? Why don't we look out for each other like they do? But they're a small minority here. They don't share the religion of the country. They don't, as ethnic Jews, don't the race. They'll know it's different. They don't share the race of the majority or the founders of the country, but yet they want to come here and tell us what to do. They want to lead our movements. They want to influence our policy. And all I'm saying is that is a recipe for resentment. It's almost a form of soft colonialism. It's certainly something approaching like a mafia running a society. And so I said that very plainly to Hazony. I said, look, I think there probably could be what you're trying to create, which is a Zionist American Nationalist Alliance. I said, but you got to accept a diminished role. And nobody wants to talk about that we do have a Jewish elite. They do run things, but we want this to be a Christian country. And if we're going to upgrade America to a Christian country, we have to downgrade the particular roles of many Jewish people who enjoy immense power in America. But nobody wants to say that. They think we could have it all ways, but we can't. Power by its nature is exclusionary and exerts itself.
But wait, dude,
so if Jews possess
if I could, let's have a session here. Do you understand why a lot of Christians, even we're not just talking about like Zionists and stuff. Do you understand why it seems to a lot of people like your message isn't just about lifting up Christianity? It's about actively, like the way you've just phrased it, tearing Jewish people down. And I think that's what a lot of people, that's why they say, this is why you hate XYZ, blah, blah, blah. And you don't have to be anti anything to be pro-Christ. But do you understand why people are saying these things about you? Because when we're looking at examples of, is Christ King anti-Semitic? Your name is the first thing that they bring up. I've asked you point blank, are you anti-Semitic? You say no. But you can't ignore that is what people's impression are. So if I were you, at the very least, wouldn't I question my approach if it's apparently so opposite of what I'm intending? Yeah, of course.
So, I mean, you asked me, well, why is there this impression? Why does your name have this connotation? I'll tell you why. Because 7 years ago, when I met Cassie Dillon and I met Elliot Hamilton and Aaron Bandler, who are writers at the Daily Wire. They were all enamored with me. They wanted me to write for Daily Wire, but I kept questioning foreign aid. I didn't sound then like I sound now, because I was honestly, and when I say like now, I mean, I was a little bit more moderate back then, and I was more understanding. I sounded a lot more like you or like other people on the space, because I was legitimately questioning. And so I would say things like, hey, you know, we're America first. Why is it that there seems to be a double standard with Israel? And I was constantly told, you can't ask that. You can't ask that this way. That's anti-Semitic to ask that. I mean, my pinned tweet, if you go to my pinned tweet, on Christmas, I was 18 years old. I tweeted at Ben Shapiro, hey, I don't think I've ever seen an article critical of Israel on Daily Wire, which I think is a fair observation, and it's also true.
I saw Jake Shields tweeted that. I saw that, and I understood.
Can I finish here?
Yeah, I mean, you like to carry the mic for like 5 minutes.
I'm answering. This is a question.
Go for it.
This is a question about my perception about me. So I said that, and Ben Shapiro said, well, you're an anti-Semite for asking. It's anti-Semitic to say Jews are loyal to Israel. But it's also obviously true. I mean, they make Aliyah. Many of them serve in the IDF. I mean, what do you call that other than some kind of loyalty? Now, then what happened is Cassie Dillon and many others started watching my show and clipping out of context every little thing that I said, joking, or, you know, they'll take it in bad faith. And they started collecting it and sending it to Media Matters and sending it to ADL. And when you Google my name, you know, so you ask me, why is there this impression? It's because if you Google my name, the first results will be ADL, SPLC, Star Tribune, and they'll say 5 things you need to know. Well, you know, 6 years ago, Nick Fuentes said this, and one time Nick Fuentes said that, and blah, blah, blah. So it is, we have to, and it's like I said about Jewish power, we can't pretend there isn't this reality of a very well-formed and well-funded hit piece mill, that if you step out, if you go out of line, and Candace Owens said this, and they bring out your rap sheet and they say Candace Owens, who one time liked a tweet that said this, Candace Owens, who 5 years ago made a remark about how, you know, if Hitler only made Germany great again, that would be fine. That's why there's a perception, because everybody that watches my show, everybody that listens to me in my own words and isn't like looking to destroy my reputation, they don't come away with the idea that I hate Jews. As a matter of fact, on the contrary, many people say I'm not hard enough. Many people do the same thing in the reverse. They'll take clips from my show where I say, some of the finest people I know are Jewish, or I have so many of my friends are Jews. Some of the smartest people I know are Jews. I love Laura Loomer. I went to her campaign. I drove 5 hours to go to her campaign party the day of the election. So, you know, or they'll show all the Jewish associates I've had. So, you know, you could just as easily play the reverse and say, well, you know, why do so many anti-Semites think you're a Zionist sellout? You know, so it's all about perception is what you see. And when groups like SPLC and ADL are out there and they create this screen where no one can hear what I have to say because I'm censored, and then when they look me up, they see, oh, my greatest hits, every unfortunate thing I've ever said, taken out of context, even if it's a joke. You know, Benny Johnson during the Groyper War made this super thread of all these things I said on my show to ruin my reputation. Half of them were jokes. Someone sent a super chat and said, oh, what if the Cookie Monster wanted to bake 6 million cookies? It wasn't even me saying it, and I kind of laughed and played along. They used that and smeared me as a Holocaust denier immediately. They wrote about it in the Washington Post. Someone else said it. It was a joke. They didn't care because they could take that and say, we're going to use this to destroy his reputation and call him a certain name. So that's why there's a perception. Let's not pretend like, you know, it's not extremely calculated and like that's not part of their MO. It's been that way for a long time and everyone knows that.
Nick, I think when I saw Jake Shields' tweet, when he was retweeting you telling some of this story, like being 18 and having a potential career taken away from you because you were just questioning foreign aid to Israel, I understood more like the genesis of how you got to where you are. And I think that it becomes more understandable. Like if you were cut out at the knees just for questioning Israel, and there's a lot of Jews in the story doing it to you, I do get it. I really do get it. I just think that the highest thesis of where is the evil in the world coming from, I align with Alex Jones. I talk about the globalists, because the global cabal, I said earlier, it's about 50-50. Like the Morgans and the Rockefellers, not Jews. The Rothschilds, Soros, Jews. So I think it's about 50-50. I think you got a particularly nasty experience from a lot of people that are Jews, that are connected or puppeteered by the cabal. So I can understand it's sending you in that direction. I just think the highest ideal, the highest order of what we should be fighting is the Satanism, the Satanists. These people literally get together and they do satanic rituals. They sacrifice children. Like, that's what these people are. They're Satanists. And yeah, half of them, I would say, come from Jewish families. Half of them come from Christian families. But they're not following the Torah. They're not following Christ. They're following Satan. And I think that's the thing that we should focus on. And that's what unites people.
Can I just say too, like, I think thinking about Nick's story in terms of like being dragged by Ben Shapiro when he was 18 years old, why aren't people coming down on Ben Shapiro and saying, why are you using your platform and your audience to drag an 18-year-old who is just asking questions? I thought the same thing when I saw Andrew Klavan doing it last year, right after October 7th, when, by the way, Nick was actually doing some of the most nuanced commentary in the entire space in that time. He was like, and the only reason I know that is I was fully tuning into what he was saying, expecting him to drag Israel. I was like, what anti-Semitic shit is Nick Fuentes going to say today? And then he didn't. And it was shocking to me to watch episode after episode after episode when he could have been full on like anything he wanted to say, and he didn't do it. And he was restrained and nuanced, and Andrew Klavan still came down on him then. And it's like, okay, so now the entire conservative establishment is coming down on a 25-year-old. And I remember back to like in 2021 when I was in the middle of like a 2-hour spiritual discussion on Twitter, when I made a comment that I said like Hitler went to heaven mostly because I don't believe hell exists. So if hell doesn't exist, no one can actually go there. And I was dragged resoundingly all over Twitter for it. I had a hit piece planted on me in Newsweek. I was canceled by PragerU for it. And I was like, I was in the middle of a 2-hour spiritual discussion. And by the way, Jews don't even think hell exists either. They actually agree with me on that point. So why
No, it's
aren't we
called
having
Gehenna. It exists.
well, we can have that. I'm not interested in that conversation now. I'm interested in why are we taking things out of context, dragging people all over the internet when there's no evil intent involved, and then not going to the people who are doing this and saying, why are you being dishonest? Why are you being intellectually dishonest? Why do you have it out for randos? Hang on. Why do you have it out for randos on the internet? That should be as vehemently vilified as anything that Nick has said or done.
I mean, Carlin, I agree that people should be doing it, but to go back to Nick's original point, the reason why people aren't doing that is because of Holocaustianity. You know, like,
well, I know that, bro. I know that.
Nobody wants to, criticize. Excuse me, sorry for the emergency vehicle in the background. Nobody wants to criticize Jews for abusing their power to destroy the lives of people who perpetuate quote unquote anti-Semitism for questioning foreign aid to Israel. Nobody wants to even touch that subject because it's the third rail and everybody's afraid of having their lives destroyed. And that, this is something Nick is just so right about, is that has to change. And I think, if there's one really positive thing that's come of this space and this discourse in the past week, but especially in the past, year and a half since Elon Musk's acquisition of X, it's the fact that, now people actually can have these conversations, and there can be honest conversations that are being had about all this stuff. And to go back to the original point that I made way earlier in the space, I think it's a net positive for people to speak honestly about the way that Jews abuse their power. I think it's a net positive for those conversations to happen, and for people like Andrew to be in the space and to concede that point from a place of objectivity and honesty. Because if that doesn't happen, excuse me, there's like some sort of emergency happening near me. If that doesn't happen, historically, anti-Semitism does boil over, and that is not in the interest of the average Jew to want that to happen. I don't want that to happen. I could see something like that happening in the next decade or two. It seems like that's the direction that the winds are blowing. And as a Christian, I don't want to see innocent Jewish people get caught in that crossfire.
Well, 100%. That's why I do spaces like this, and that's why I want there to be more conversations like this. And I think it's even fine for Nick to examine Jewish power, because obviously there's a lot of it being exerted in the wrong way. And I think that the more this is done, the better it is for everybody, because if you can't even talk about a certain group of people, you're just going to hate them. So yes, 100%. I think it's boxing that's talking. My app is glitching, but you're right. And the only thing I'll say again, I think that it's good to, just like when there's crime in the black community and we have to just, what are the roots of the problem? Oh, they wanted fathers out of the home, so that we can get to the root of the problem and fix it. We have to be able to talk about the specific problems in the Jewish community, like the Daily Wire. What's their real agenda? How, like, what's going on? That we have to be able to talk about it specifically. Where's the money coming from, et cetera, to be able to fix it. But at the end of the day, all of the issues, the evil in this world, it all comes from Satan.
I think, did he cut out?
No, I can
Can you hear him? All the issues come from the devil, Satan, the opponent. And he's got people that really do commune with him, like the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. These people are in a satanic cabal. And the whole using Jews as a shield is just one plank of what they do. Like anti-Semitism, the ADL, they throw Jews as a human shield in front of their evil behavior. And nobody should say, yeah, that's part of my tribe. Like, they're Satanists. They're using us literally as a human shield. So they're evil, and it's fine to examine the specific evil that Jews do. I just think at the end of the day, it's the Satanism is the true issue, and some of the Jews are just one flavor of it.
Yeah, but here's the thing: do you even think it's just Satanism, or is it just retarded, egotistical optics? Because I remember when after October 7th, they made this tweet about how Jews should be included in movies and film and television. You should not be anti-Semitic, and hiring Jewish actors. I swear to God, they did this. It's like they have no optics.
No, that's a different issue. That also exists. Like the egotism of a lot of Jews, massive ego. That's why Shmuley is behaving the way he is, because his ego is so broken. Candace destroyed him, and so he's blind. He's ego blind to see how bad he looks right now. He'll justify himself doing anything. There's a lot of
agree with you. I don't think he even cares about Candace Owens. I think he's doing this because he's trying to take out Ben Shapiro, and he sees it, and he's trying to position himself.
That's such a stupid point. Oh my God, so stupid
as the top Jew of that donor group, and there's a huge war going on between Ben Shapiro and Shmuley Boteach, and Candace Owens. What he did to her was disgusting. You know what he did to her was disgusting. It's really important.
Hold on, wait. We have Jeremy Boring here. Let's hear from Jeremy Boring.
Jeremy Boring, come on up.
Yeah, I don't have much to say, but somebody just asked the question, what's the Daily Wire's agenda and where does the money come from? And someone else said there's a war between Ben Shapiro and Rabbi Shmuley for Jewish donors.
Yeah, disregard the second point. It was retarded.
Yeah. Obviously, Daily Wire doesn't have any donors. We're a for-profit company. And where the money comes from is our tens of millions large audience. We have 1 million subscribers. We have 1 million people a day listening to the Ben Shapiro show. You make a lot of money when you run a good business. So I don't need to engage.
The Wilkes brothers didn't give you any money to start the Daily Wire?
Of course they did. You mean, did I take startup capital 9 years ago? Yes, I took $4.7 million 9 years ago to start the Daily Wire. We did $220 million of revenue last year. Also, the Wilkes brothers aren't Jewish. Daily Wire isn't owned by Jews. This is the thing that Rabbi Shmuley fails to comprehend, even though I've said it, Ben said it, even Candace has said publicly. Ben doesn't run the Daily Wire. He's not the majority owner of the Daily Wire. The Daily Wire is majority owned and run by Christians. The decisions that we make as a company, we make as Christian men. And if somebody wants to look for the great conspiracy of who makes the Daily Wire the way that it is, if you want to look for somebody to blame for the Daily Wire, you're welcome to blame me, because I'm the guy who makes the Daily Wire the way that it is.
I just want to clarify my statement that it's Shmuley who's out there looking for donors. He's the one who his global value network is completely donor based.
Jeremy, what did Candace do that she deserved to be fired?
Well, I'm not going to have a conversation about Candace. When you run a business, you're not at liberty to have discussions about people that you fire. I know that everybody would like for me to be able to do that. I'm not able to do that.
Hey, Jeremy,
I'm not sure
wait.
if that today.
Can I have a question? Yeah. Did the ADL or Media Matters, did they contribute to your decision to fire her?
No. Media Matters is like the greatest gift ever given to the Daily Wire. I love that they literally pay people 6 figures a year to listen to all of my content and promote it for me. I can't believe that they continue to do it. It's the stupidest organization that ever existed. And the ADL's garbage. I don't care what the ADL thinks any more than I care what Rabbi Shmuley thinks.
But Jeremy, I mean, I do view it as suspect that Candace appeared to have been fired a day after the ADL came out with a hit piece on her saying that she was allying with anti-Semites like Nick Fuentes. I mean, when the ADL drops something like that and then Candace gets let go 24 hours later, it looks suspicious.
Yeah, I understand that people who are looking for a conspiracy will find one. Ben Shapiro is as critical of the ADL as anybody out there. I've never met anyone at the ADL. I've never said a positive word about the ADL. The Daily Wire, don't think you can find a host at the Daily Wire who's ever had a positive thing to say about the ADL. So I can't prove a negative. I can't prove that I didn't fire Candace Owens because of the ADL. I can only tell you that I didn't fire Candace Owens because of the ADL.
So you're saying that they
ADL. I don't care
speculated.
anything about what the ADL publishes.
You know what? Ben Shapiro behaves a lot like the ADL, though. He once made a list on Twitter of people that are quote unquote alt-right, which at the time was used synonymously for white supremacist, and he listed everybody from Ron Paul, Ann Coulter, Mike Cernovich, Alex Jones, basically anybody that was anti-war. Ben Shapiro listed as alt-right, aka white supremacist. So Ben behaves a lot like the ADL in trying to condemn people that are for America and against foreign aid or getting entangled in foreign war. So you can say, the Daily Wire has no agenda. We're just funded by Christian Zionists.
I'll be sure to tell
Excuse me?
Hey, Jeremy.
Oh, that's so cute. That's so cute, Jeremy.
Hang on.
Wait,
I have an actual.
Well,
Yeah,
hey,
'cause
let me
there's-
jump in here. Let me jump in here.
Okay, reset. Everyone can't talk over each other. There will probably be a glitch.
I'd like to ask a little bit more about Candace Owens being fired by the Daily Wire. I just want to preface this to say, I was an organizational psychologist for a while. I worked with a lot of organizations that were quite frankly larger than the Daily Wire in terms of, helping them with staffing issues, working through the employees to fire, things like that. Jeremy, I'm just wondering, and I guess I'm asking this as a yes or no question, did Candace Owens violate any specific policies at the Daily Wire? And I'm not asking you to tell us which policies. I'm just asking, was she fired because she violated a company policy?
I'm not going to make any comment about the Daily Wire separation from Candace Owens in this forum.
So that's no then. Just to be clear with everyone, that's no. She did not violate any company policies.
Well, I don't. We're not.
That's a very sneaky way of ascribing to me an answer that I did not give.
If she violated a company policy, you would have been able to say yes to the question, Jeremy. I know that much.
Okay, so Candace is not here. This is not about Candace specifically. Let's have a conversation around the broader issue, though. Andrew Klavan, who, aside from this latest podcast, I really agree with a lot of what he says. He essentially said that Candace Owens could not work at the Daily Wire because of racial Jew hatred. And I think throughout this whole space, it seems like the running theme is that there's a lot of frustrations over things that are not Jew hatred being portrayed as Jew hatred. And that's basically what this entire conversation is about. Now even Christ is King is being portrayed as Jew hatred. You did a thread, Jeremy, or at least a post where you say that Christ is King can be anti-Semitic. Is this where we are, where we're as conservatives saying that this is a dog whistle?
No one is saying that Christ is King is a dog whistle per se. But certainly Christ is King can be a dog whistle. No one is saying that Christ is King is anti-Semitic per se. But of course, Christ is King can be anti-Semitic. When you use a term, when you use a phrase, when you use anything, the purpose for which you use it determines a lot about what it is. Christ is King. That's a matter of fact. That is basic Christian doctrine. That is my belief. That is Andrew Klavan's belief. That's the belief of, every actual Christian on planet Earth. That doesn't mean that one cannot use the term Christ is king to engage in anti-Semitism. Of course they can. There's an entire commandment in the Bible about not carrying forth the name of the Lord thy God in vain, because, of course, one can do things in the name of God that are not things that God would want you to do. When you invoke the name of the king for something that isn't the actual purpose of the king, you're carrying forth the name of the king in vain. And I think that to pretend that people on X over the last week have not carried forth the name of the Lord God in vain is willfully deceptive. Of course, people have been doing that. Is everyone who has said Christ is king in the last week on X carrying forth the name of the Lord in vain? No, I've said Jesus Christ is king, and many other people have said Jesus Christ is king because we believe that Jesus Christ is king. But that is certainly not the only usage that we've all observed on X. To pretend otherwise is ridiculous and bad faith.
Well, I mean, we have examples of people saying Christ is king, you nasty, and then slurs, which, obviously is condemnable. But I guess, is it considered anti-Semitism if you are saying it specifically because this is someone who is Jewish who does not believe in Christ?
Well, in what context? If I have a conversation with Ben Shapiro about the divinity of Christ, I might make an argument that Matthew as a gospel tends to elevate the position of Christ as king, whereas, say, the book of John might elevate Christ and his divinity. That's a perfectly reasonable thing to have a conversation with a Jewish person about. But if I don't like a Jewish person, I don't like something that they say, and I say Christ is king, I might as well add comma sucker exclamation point after it. Then yeah, of course I'm doing something that's reprehensible, and I shouldn't use the name of God in that way. So even to say, is it anti-Semitism to say Christ is king to a Jewish person? In what context? Of course, it's not per se anti-Semitic to say Christ is king to a Jewish person. It happens to be a very true thing to say. But just because something is true doesn't mean that there's not a context in which it is a bad thing to do.
Can I jump in here? Because the important thing, I think the operative word is context. I think everybody here acknowledges, everyone here who's Christian, maybe not Andrew and Adam, but everyone here who's Christian would affirm that there is nothing, as you say, per se anti-Semitic or problematic about saying Christ is king. It's a fact. But to the point, so really the operative word is context. In what context is it being used? I think that's a point you're making. That's a point that Klavan made. What I'm interested in is everyone's focusing on whether Christ is king is anti-Semitic. But what was a little bit more shocking to me in what Andrew Klavan said was about Ben Shapiro. And he said that he would not wish Shapiro to become Christian because if Shapiro became Christian, it would cause devastation to himself and everybody in his life. And he almost seemed to suggest that we shouldn't try to convert Shapiro, to come on to him in this way and say, you should be Christian, Christ is king. Even in the context of evangelizing, Klavan seemed to push back on that and say, actually, God put Shapiro where he needs to be and doesn't want Shapiro to be Christian, doesn't want Shapiro to say Christ is king because he's, pushing family values or something in his station as head of Daily Wire, or rather as the head pundit on Daily Wire. So I'm wondering, do you agree with that? What is your position on what Klavan said? Because to me, I think that's the important context when he said that Christ is king is anti-Semitic. And I think a lot of Christians were offended by that.
I think it's a bit of a misrepresentation of what Drew said, though I will acknowledge that Drew is often more clear because he's often more prepared. He went on the air that day and spoke from the heart, which isn't always what he does. He's usually more prepared than that. Drew, and also I want to be clear that Andrew Klavan can speak for himself and he's not here. But knowing Andrew Klavan and knowing his relationship with Ben Shapiro and knowing a lot about his theological outlook, having read his book, The Great Good Thing, about his own conversion, I think that it's fair to say that Drew was not implying that there is a way to the Father that doesn't go through the Son. I think that what he was saying is God is sovereign. He has people where he wants them. He has someone like Ben where he wants him. He has someone like Jordan Peterson where he wants him. And Drew, my understanding of what Drew said is that Drew's belief is that God has them where he wants them and he'll get it sorted out. And that's, I don't think Drew would, if he were here, I don't think that he would say that it's wrong to evangelize Ben Shapiro any more than it's wrong to evangelize anyone else. That there's a, again, context matters. There's a way to evangelize someone that is useful, and probably a way to evangelize someone that is not useful. But I don't think that Drew was trying to intimate that he believes that there is a path to the Father that doesn't go through the Son. Obviously, salvation's a mystery. We're to work out our own salvation with fear and trembling. And Drew is a Christian. I mean, again, I would encourage anyone to read The Great Good Thing, Drew's book about his own journey to Christianity, which is as unique as Andrew Klavan himself is. But I understand why a person who listened to what Drew said on his podcast might have come away with the impression that he was suggesting that let's not invoke Ben, let's invoke Jordan Peterson here, because it sidesteps other issues that are contested on this particular conversation. But Jordan Peterson, Drew is not suggesting that Jordan Peterson has a path to the Father that doesn't go through the Son. He's suggesting that that God is using Jordan Peterson where Jordan Peterson is, and that not everything about how God works is always exactly obvious to us. Also, we live at a moment in linear time, and God takes a much different view, probably, than we do. And I think that's fair to say, since there are no second generation Christians, and everyone on this space who is a Christian at some point was not a Christian. So I think that's what Drew was speaking to.
Well, but he said specifically, and I'm not, I'm just trying to ask a question here. He said specifically, because I just pulled up the quote, and I'm not trying to rip him apart, because I do the same. I do a live stream. People take what I say out of context. Sometimes people that are friendly with you do this, but I'll be charitable and say, fair enough. If he was off the cuff, I get it. He said, if Ben were to embrace Jesus, it would cause devastation to his family, to the people who love him, to the people who listen to him, to his position in the world. Now, I know you just gave an explanation. You can't speak for him, obviously, but that's a pretty outrageous statement to say that. I mean, literally, that's the quote. To embrace Jesus would cause devastation to his life and his position. I mean, certainly, just on its face, the denotative meaning of those words, surely you would disagree with this, right? That it is always the right moment to embrace Christianity, and that, like, obviously no devastation could come from embracing Jesus, right? I mean, do you agree with this? I know I'm not trying to say take a side against Klavan, but I mean, let's just say the words as they are. You would disagree with this, right?
I disagree that the denotative meaning of course I believe that devastation can come into people's lives when they embrace Christ. That devastation is Christ sets Father against Son. Public position. I think that that's an uncharitable view of what Drew was likely saying, which is far more likely to be Jordan is where Jordan is, and Ben is where Ben is, and God is doing what God is doing. And obviously, these issues are obviously the issue of where a person is on their journey is a very complex one. But no, I don't believe.
I think, and I'm just going to say this, and then other people can jump in. But I think, and I appreciate I think you're giving a thoughtful response to this. But if I were to just rebut kind of the whole premise, I think it's very interesting that when it comes to saying Jesus is king, or when it comes to remarks that Candace has made, or remarks that Ye has made, or even someone like myself has made, it seems like it's always the most uncharitable. It's always the motive is impugned, always extrapolate the worst possible idea or the worst possible intention. But when it comes to the people on your side, when Ben Shapiro says, well, Jesus was a rebel that got killed for his trouble, hands up, don't nail. When Andrew Klavan says, well, Shapiro can't accept Jesus because it would cause devastation in his life, well, we almost have to read into it the contrary meaning, like the connotative meaning or the intended meaning is like the opposite of what was said. So when it comes to people that talk about Israel or Jewish power, or when they say Christ is king, well, they got to be super, super careful about how they say it. But if somebody says hands up, don't nail, when somebody says transfer is not a dirty word, which I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, when somebody says, accepting Jesus is going to cause devastation, well, it's uncharitable to read what they say. And I think that's kind of to the point of even what somebody earlier was saying, which is this hypocrisy about cancel culture, and I know you're not these people, but Dave Rubin is to me the perfect example. As you know, the guy made his career saying, hey, I'm a liberal, but even though we disagree, we can have a conversation. Don't burn my book, this kind of thing. And then I have personal knowledge that when people step out of line on Israel, he makes calls. Now, you may refute that. Other people may refute that. That is something I've heard. And of course, he said on the Patrick Bet-David show, day after Candace Owens debated Barkley, he said, well, I don't consider Candace a friend anymore. And, that's just the nature of the thing we're in. And it's like, I don't really know what that means, because Rubin will have on socialists, communists, leftists, progressives, as well as many conservatives, and he'll be amicable towards them, and nothing is off limits. But it does seem that one thing is off limits, and that's a thing that's very close to his heart. And that's the thing that's also intertwined with his business partner, who's at Hebrew University, and all these things. And I think what people are trying to say is that, it just seems like there's a great big double standard when it concerns Israel, Jews, anything regarding those kinds of topics as pertains to cancel culture, the free marketplace of ideas, and every card's on the table. I'm not trying to interrogate you. I am actually listening to your response. That's how I feel, and that's kind of how I felt my whole career. Because last thing, I used to be. I'm not saying this like you're missing my $15 subscription or whatever, but when I was a teenager, I was a huge fan of all you guys, like Shapiro and Klavan and even Bill Whittle. I've been watching you guys since Truth Revolt and PJ Media, and I was putting out all those arguments. I mean, people be surprised to learn that I was losing friends in high school because I was saying, hey, Israel's fought off 4 wars of extermination, and they're the most moral army. There's the a beacon of democracy and a sea of barbarism. But then I started to notice as I got older the peculiar nature of this, the special attention to Israel, the fact that there never seemed to be a criticism entertained, that always fell outside the scope of the conversation. And then when I met people from Daily Wire and I asked them, I got rebuffed, I got shut down, I got canceled. And then people like Cassie Dillon, who has since converted away from Christianity to Judaism, which is apostasy, a great sin, she clips the show and sends it to Media Matters. So, I mean, you guys, and by the way, you say no one likes the ADL. Shapiro was reposting ADL after October 7th when Greenblatt went on and put everybody on MSNBC on blast, because I think you guys don't have a problem with the ADL. You have a problem with Greenblatt, because Greenblatt supports BLM and, he's a left-wing partisan. So, that's where I'm coming from. It's not a place of Jew hatred. It's just a place of, I'm America first. I'm a Christian. These other people, they lost me when they started canceling over Israel stuff and encouraging apostasy or saying we can't convert to Christianity. There's this Judeo-Christian thing. You lost me because it's just not true.
I think my only response to that would be that, and I think I've spoken long enough on spaces that I wasn't actually invited to, so I appreciate everybody letting me speak at all. I think that the amount of charity that we give to one is based on their body of work. I can give some charity to Andrew Klavan's positions on his broadcast this last week because he's spoken so extensively about his faith. He's written extensively about his faith. He's probably one of the most forthright people that I've ever met. You can't get him to not tell you exactly what he thinks. And so I have a broad context with which to judge the things that he says. I have a broad context to understand the things that Ben says. And, Nick, to the extent that you've said things like, when we come to power, we're going to kill the perfidious Jews, it's very hard then not to keep that as context in mind when you say that you're not anti-Semitic. And I understand that you're a very funny guy. You make very subtle arguments and you tell a lot of jokes. It's very hard after a certain amount of time, though, to believe that all of those jokes are jokes. And so, to the extent that you had a bad experience with some of the young people who worked for me 10 years ago or 9 years ago or whatever it was, 8 years ago, that's unfortunate. I wish that things had turned out a little bit different than they had. At the same time, I'm very concerned about a lot of the things that you say now. I think you take a very radical position. I hope when you say Christ is king that you mean it.
If I may, I'd like to, I don't know if Standis Owens wants to respond to that.
Yeah, I don't want to take up all your time, Jeremy, and that's fair enough. And I hope you don't see this as me like the aggrieved, like, basically did that. So it's not sour grapes. I'm just trying to tell people where I'm coming from, because I think a lot of people, when Candace Owens says Christ is king, they bring my name into it and they say, oh, is this Groyper, Fuentes stuff? And, to your point about saying killing Jews or whatever, again, I think I would say the same thing to you about that you would say about Klavan, which is that, what I said is that clearly, and I think you might even agree with this, although you probably shouldn't say it because it would, it would be bad. But what I said is that I think there really are like devil worshippers involved in the government. I think they're really sadistic people. And I don't mean like super magical conspiratorial stuff, but I mean, I think there are some really sick, sadistic people that run the country. And what I said is that when you get these people who believe in this esoteric stuff and they really are devil worshippers, I said, these are people that you got to give the death penalty. I said, when it comes to, like, when I see these drag artists at the Padres thing and they're doing a dance on the crucifix and stuff like that, to me, that's satanic. And I think you got to draw a line. You got to introduce some blasphemy restrictions. And so that's what I mean, I know they took it out of context, said, oh, he wants to kill everybody. And the media was so happy that I said it in a rather unfortunate way. But if you play back the clip, that's what I said. Even the holy war thing, I know Inspiring Philosophies here, he reviewed my rally where I said, we're going to make them die in a holy war. Very similar. And I will concede this. Okay, I really shouldn't. It's not smart of me to do this, but I tell the truth. I will concede something to you, Jeremy, and to Andrew and to Adam, although I shouldn't. It's bad politics. But I really don't hate anybody, and I love everybody. And my vision for the country is for everyone to have rights and dignity. Watch all my speeches. I say that in all my speeches. I understand why then you don't have a lot of, as you say, charitability. They are not, they don't feel like they can extend charitability towards me when I say, hey, I love you guys, but you make these edgy jokes. So I get it. And I think that as I get older, I'm trying to reel that in. Because, you got to remember, I got my start when I was 18 years old. Ben Shapiro was attacking me when I was 18, calling me an anti-Semite. I was under attack by Reagan Battalion and Benny Politzik around my 19th birthday. And as I've gotten older, I've come to, I think, moderate myself a little bit in some ways. Some would say the opposite, but at least internally that's happening. So I get where you're coming from, but my strong position is just that we got to put America first. America's got to be a Christian country. And as long as guys like Shapiro cannot say Christ is king and they refuse to say America first, I think it's notable. Ben Shapiro has never uttered those words. I don't think they should have leadership in America. So, people can say, well, I don't like what you say about this and that. I don't like that guys like Shapiro will not say Christ is king, America first. I think they forfeit their ability to lead. I would never listen to somebody that can't say those things, because I mean, those things are really the foundation of wisdom, which is the love of God, which, as you say, goes through the Son, as we all know, can only go through Jesus, and oikophilia, which is, you know, your love of your home, your love of your homeland that you reside in, not some other homeland. So I just want to get that across to you. It's kind of a strange circumstance that we're talking, but that's how I feel about
And
it.
I'll say this, Nick, that I listen to your show quite often. I think you're one of the most talented people out there, and I'm very concerned about some of the things that you're saying. I wish, I think that you're a very gifted communicator, and so it's hard for me to imagine that you consistently miscommunicate some of these things. And I'll hope that I'm wrong and yield the floor back to all the people who actually came on here to talk to each other.
Well, if I may, I'd like to jump in here. First off, Jeremy, thank you for coming in to speak, especially after the discourse the past couple of days. In charity towards Nick, I've heard a number of the more outrageous things that he said, and you know, I personally tend to write a lot of it off as him being edgy and entertaining for his audience. Maybe I'm on the mark there, maybe I'm off. I don't know, but I want to follow up on something he said in the thread that you guys are kind of pulling at. So, you know, first off, let me just start, Jeremy, respectfully by saying that I understand the criticism that you and others, Joel Berry, have been making about the way that Christians have been presenting this Christ is King, these Christ is King statements on the timeline, and how oftentimes that is attached to slurs towards Jews, just general hatred towards Jews that obviously isn't rooted in Christ. I understand that criticism. I'm a Christian. As a Christian, I believe that Christ should reign in our hearts, and not just politically, but, you know, we ought to act with love towards people who we disagree with or who hate us or whatever. So I just want to say I understand the criticism that you've been leveraging over the past few days, but one of the things that stands out to me as a Christian, as someone who wants America put first in our country, is, I guess, like, just watching the discourse around this, looking at Candace Owens firing, hearing Nick's anecdote about getting, you know, viciously attacked as a quote unquote anti-Semite when he was 18. I speak for myself and a lot of other people on the right wing when I say that my perception of the Daily Wire, and of course I'm sure you'd probably disagree with this, but my perception of the Daily Wire is that in many ways it is an Israel first company. And the reason why I say that is because, like I said, I saw the ADL hit piece come out against Candace Owens, aligning her with Nick Fuentes. Boom, 24 hours later, she's sacked from the Daily Wire. This happens after she's criticizing the nefarious ways in which some Jews use their power. She's saying things that are considered quote unquote anti-Semitic. Boom, she gets fired from the Daily Wire. I see that happen. I see this criticism of these Christ is King statements being labeled anti-Semitic. I see a lot of noise being made about these things. But as a Christian who wants to see a company like Daily Wire, which is at the vanguard of, you know, general conservative thought in America, as a Christian who wants to see a company like you guys stand up for America first values, I see you putting more attention towards this quote unquote anti-Semitism than, for example, the gross violation of our First Amendment rights in America with all of these anti-Semitic speech laws, right? I brought this up earlier in the conversation. This has been a theme of this particular space tonight, Jeremy. As an American, I see the fact that Jewish people are, legally speaking, the most protected group of people in America. More than half the states in America have laws banning criticism of Israel on behalf of businesses, banning free speech where people are criticizing or boycotting the Israeli government. There were these laws that were just passed in South Dakota that make it illegal to make anti-Semitic statements saying that Jews are they're loyal to Israel, more loyal to Israel than America. They've made it illegal, according to the IHRA standard of anti-Semitism, to say that Jews had Christ killed, which is, as you're a Christian, I'm a Christian, we both know that's simply a biblical fact, that the Jewish Pharisees had Jesus Christ killed. That's not disputable. Like, that's just a fact. as a Christian and as an American, I see free speech in America completely under attack. The Jewish lobby has a tremendous amount of power to do this, to try and make this happen. I think it's anti-Christian values, it's anti-biblical, and it's also anti-American. And for a conservative company, to me, it's like, okay, you guys are making a lot of noise about this quote unquote anti-Semitism, but you guys aren't really making much noise about the fact that free speech in America is completely under assault by Jewish people. And I'm kind of wondering, like, why? Like, it seems like you guys are an Israel first country, not an America first country. What do you have to say to that?
Well, one thing I would say is that no one, to my knowledge, at the Daily Wire is a citizen of any country other than America. I think that my track record, or the people who I've worked with in my career, from Bill Whittle, who was mentioned earlier, all the way through Matt Walsh today, who opposes essentially all foreign aid, including to Israel. I think that it's difficult to make an argument that we aren't for our country, or that we're not pro our country, or that the vast majority of our energies don't go into fighting the left and building the future in this country. I think that probably a more accurate thing, I believe, is that because you have a particular viewpoint about American involvement in Israel, or Jewish involvement in our national politics, that you hear our feelings about Israel. And by our, I probably mean mine and Ben's most prominently, since Matt Walsh's is very different, or even Michael Knowles's is very different. I think that you hear that resonate more loudly, but the actual truth is that the vast majority of our efforts go into trying to protect our country and trying to change the politics in our country, trying to fight for our culture. And I say our because Ben Shapiro is also an American citizen. Ben Shapiro is also, he spent every single day of his life, other than a brief stint at Harvard Law, he spent every single day of his life in Southern California until very recent years when we moved the company. So, in some ways, I think a man hears what he wants to hear and disregards the rest. And that's probably a bit of what we're dealing with. The idea that we're Israel first, though, is just that's not accurate.
But you say that you all have different views on Israel, and I'm sure to a certain extent that's true, but do you understand, at least from the public perspective, when you fire the one host who's actually outspokenly critical of what Israel is doing, how that's not what it looks like? And even, Andrew Klavan in his video, he says it's not anti-Semitic to criticize Israel. It's not anti-Semitic to, criticize or, try to give sympathy to the Palestinians. I can't think of a single prominent conservative who does that, who's critical of Israel and who, is giving sympathy to the Palestinians, who is not smeared as anti-Semitic. You say that you give, grace depending on record, which is fair. Candace Owens, she's someone who worked for PragerU, Daily Wire. She spent her career calling out issues within the Black community, including Black leaders, criticizing the American government. But again, outside perspective, at least, it looks as if when she started doing those exact same things, which she's done her entire career, to people who happen to be Jewish and to specifically now the Israeli government, that's when it became
engage in any conversation about the termination of Candace from the Daily Wire. It's counterproductive, and I'm not in a position to do it.
Sure. But I guess to the broader point, is there a conservative that you can think of who manages to toe the line in such a way where they are critical of Israel, but is not anti-Semitic?
Matt Walsh, I think, is a great example. Matt does not support any foreign aid to
That's
Israel.
not what I said. That's not what I said. I said who is critical of Israel.
Well, critical of Israel in what regard? I'm critical of Israel. It's mostly a socialist country.
I guess for example, what they're doing in Gaza.
Well, I think it's a fundamentally wrong-headed notion. The question you're asking, Lauren, I think is akin to saying, can you think of a single prominent national conservatism who supports universal health care and abortion on demand. Well, no, those aren't actually conservative ideas. It's one thing to say that one can be critical of Israel. It's another thing to say that we aren't capable of moral reason enough to conclude that when terrorists murder 1,200 innocent people, that there's some sort of strange moral equivalency that suddenly comes in, or that suddenly Israel has no national interest in protecting its citizens or responding to that attack. So I don't know how to answer that. And I think the question
you've answered it perfectly.
The question doesn't have an answer. You're saying, is it within my values? Can someone have my values and believe that it's that Israel is worse than Hamas? And my answer is no. Someone can't have my values and conclude that.
But I'm pretty sure I didn't say that Israel was worse than Hamas. I said Israel's response in Gaza, which obviously, there are other countries who have their own military forces who have criticized the military operation there. And I'm assuming that they would understand what possibilities there are in terms of a retribution or retaliation. But I suppose that's the issue that people are having. It's not about sharing your exact same values, but if you can't think of someone who is conservative broadly on the right wing, who is simultaneously critical of what is going on in Gaza right now, who is not an anti-Semite, it kind of speaks to the problem that I think people are trying to.
About 7,000 people listening right now. And I think the question that a lot of people have is specifically about you, and maybe you could even speak to Ben as well, because you guys are like best friends, you know him a long time. Would you consider yourself to explicitly be America first? And would you be willing to say right now in front of 7,000 people that you are America first? And if you can't say that, then why not? And do you think Ben would consider himself to be America first? And if not, then why?
Well, the term America first, like many terms in politics, can be quite loaded. And so, for example, the fact that that Nick has to happen. And so, of course, there is some version of absurdity in which America would do something evil and you wouldn't be able to support your own country. But very broadly speaking, in the country that I love, the country that is my home, the country for which I would gladly side with in almost any conceivable roots. But interestingly, nobody ever accuses me of loving
Well, perhaps I can clarify the question a little. The core American value of freedom of speech being threatened by anti-BDS laws is wrong, that these go against American values? Do you stand against these laws that prohibit Americans from exercising their free speech and speaking Christian truths that we believe in? Do you believe that that's wrong?
I want to reduce the question down. Do I believe that laws that impede American speech are wrong, even laws that impede American speech where anti-Semitism is concerned? Yes.
Do you believe that there should be anti-Semitism laws in general?
No.
Based.
I would say, just to point this out, you mentioned, Ben Shapiro, and him being America first, and he kind of flipped positions. He said in the past in a speech that, Israel can fight their own battles, right? And then, even to the point about, interests and how the alignment they wire, you have Dave Rubin up there, right? And he is LGBT.
Ben has not said that America should step in the war between Israel and Hamas.
Who are critical of Israel, like Candace Owens, who, is let go. Like, it is being, pro-Israel. Like that at Daywire.
I'm sorry, I had an audio glitch. Can you ask the question one more time?
Yeah. So in terms of they're let go. Like, how do you say you're a conservative platform or organization when you platform people like Dave Rubin, and I guess like would have people removed for pretty much speaking out against Israel or having a position which gets a lot of criticism from people at Daily Wire?
So first of all, Dave Rubin doesn't work for the Daily Wire and has never worked for the Daily Wire. So I understand that you're making a broad argument, but your particulars do matter. Dave Rubin is a friend of mine. I think Dave Rubin does some good work in the world. I think Candace Owens has done an awful lot of good work in the world. The Daily Wire isn't a platform. If I owned X, for example, Nick wouldn't have to be here as Standis Owens. He could just be here as Nick. I think I disagree with Nick quite profoundly and have a lot of concerns about what his movement stands for. But if I owned a broad platform that presented itself as being the public square of the country, then certainly I think that any opinion that doesn't actually call for violence, we could argue about whether or not Nick has called for violence in some of the things that he said. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt in this moment that that I was not charitable enough in my interpretation of some of those comments, at least for the sake of this argument. Nick should still be on X and able to express his opinions. There should not be laws in the country that limit freedom of speech, broadly speaking, except in instances where we're talking about incitement to violence or direct threats against other people. Of course, I think those are very broadly speaking American values. They're values that don't exist anywhere else on earth, even in the countries that I love that aren't America, like Israel, or more so, like the United Kingdom. They don't have anything like our First Amendment protections. And I think that it's a travesty that we erode our First Amendment protections. But I'm not the CEO of X. I'm the CEO of the Daily Wire. The Daily Wire stands for American values like free speech, but the Daily Wire is a publication, right? We publish, we curate. I pay people to speak. I'm not just a platform where everybody can kind of build their own account and say the things that they want to say. I pay people, and I'm not going to pay people to say things that go beyond certain lines of what I believe. Why would I do that? I didn't get in this to get rich. I got in it when I first got started. I was doing this for nonprofits. I never thought I'd make more than $100,000. So why would I have done all the things that I've done if I didn't actually have a core set of beliefs? And why would I pay people to say things through the mechanism that I've built that I don't agree with, or at least agree with within a fairly broad sphere? It's not to say that everybody who works for me agrees with me on everything. We employ Michael Knowles, for God's sake. But very broadly speaking, people who I believe that what they believe is within a framework that I also believe.
But don't you, I guess that's the core of what Chief Trumpster, I think, is trying to get. You call Dave Rubin your friend. Dave's nice guy. When asked about Israel's actions in Gaza, that is apparently so contradictory to your own values. You can't name a single person that is not an anti-Semite who would believe that. So it kind of seems
No, that's not fair, Lauren. I can't name a single person who isn't an anti-Semite who does believe that. Isn't the same as saying that I couldn't. Very arguably there is someone out there. I don't know. I'm not like tracking the views of every single person out there to measure them against some standard to figure out if there's anybody that I could broadly align with. But I can't call someone to name right now who I think walks the line.
Do you think I'm anti-Semitic?
I haven't followed exactly what your position on all of this is. So it's a bit of a trick question, obviously.
I don't think it's a trick question.
Can I actually ask what you think anti-Semitism is, Jeremy?
Sure. Anti-Semitism is hatred of the Jews.
I know, but everybody says that. But here's the thing. Like, I criticize Israel for any number of different reasons. I've criticized them for potentially using Jeffrey Epstein to blackmail American politics. I've criticized them for war crimes in Gaza. I've criticized them. I want to see Jews go to heaven. I want to see them know their Messiah. I don't hate Jews, but people will accuse me of hating them for even asking, questions about Israel or being critical of them. So saying someone hates Jews, like, that doesn't really make sense. Can you get more specific?
Well, I don't know that I can get more specific. That's the definition. The problem when we ask a question like, is it possible for someone to disagree with Israel's actions vis-a-vis Hamas and Gaza and not be an anti-Semite? Well, certainly it's possible. A much harder question is, can I name an example of someone who's done that? That requires two things from me. One, for me to be paying very close attention to what everyone out there thinks, which I have not paid that level of attention to what everyone out there thinks. And second of all, it is just a fact that a great percentage of the people who hate Israel very much because of their hatred of Jews. And so the loudest voices who are upset about Israel in Gaza at the moment are anti-Semites. Doesn't mean that it's not possible to oppose Israel's actions in Gaza without being an anti-Semite. Of course it is. But to say, can I name one of those people? We'd have to look at an example and analyze it together. No, off the top of my head, I can't name an example.
And we're referring to specifically on the right, because obviously the left is a whole different sphere.
Yes, the left is a whole different.
Ultimately, yeah. So Jeremy, quick. So would you say, I guess, two things is that, would you say that would maybe fall into anti-Semitism? Would you say is maybe hyper-focusing? That, you maybe assess that as an individual as irrational. Would that maybe fall into your definition of anti-Semitism?
I'm sorry, I had another glitch. Could you ask the question one more time?
Yeah. So maybe, like, in other words, like some truths or some exaggerations, but you could say a hyper focusing, a hyper obsession about an issue that you as an individual assess as a little irrational. Would you consider that as your definition of anti-Semitism?
Well, my definition of anti-Semitism is hatred of Jews. But if you're asking, do I think that there's a lot of smoke and probably a fire when all someone can think about is how the Jews are here and the Jews are there and the Jews do this and the Jews do that? Yes. I think very generally speaking, anyone who uses the term the Jews, except in a fairly narrow context, is probably at least peddling an anti-Semitic rhetoric, whether they're anti-Semites or not. The Jews, I mean, you're painting with quite a broad brush there. And I think that part of the implication is that the Jews are some sort of organized force, which is a pretty amazing thing. I mean, the Jews aren't the Catholic Church, right? They don't have a pope. They don't have a magisterium. There isn't a government that is the government of the Jews. There's not an army that's the army of the Jews. So when we use the term the Jews, I think that when we use the term the Jews, we're probably already sort of predisposing the conversation toward an idea that I think is going to be a not great idea.
Hey, Jeremy, I have a
Can
question.
I jump in?
Can I just ask this real quick, Nick? I'm sorry. Like, I want to issue you a hypothetical, and I just want to get your response to it. Say you've got a really amazing opportunity to hire a conservative commentator, 20 years of experience, never set a foot out of line, just really strong conservative economic values, strong social conservative values, fits in right with what the audience of the Daily Wire is looking for. But that person starts making criticisms that are similar to what Candace Owens has been making in the past 3 months or so, and everything else about their record is just perfect. Would you consider hiring that person? Like, would that person have a slot at the Daily Wire or no?
Are you trying to ask me why I fired Candace Owens?
No, I'm asking you if you would hire someone with a beautiful, spotless track record of 20 years of amazing conservative values, but they made the same criticisms that Candace Owens has made in the past couple of months. Would that person have a job at the
Was
Daily
Candace
Wire?
Owens a conservative for 20 years?
I'm not saying that. I'm giving a
No,
hypothetical.
Candace was not conservative for 20 years. So no, this is not a Candace Owens.
Yeah, I'm not gonna.
This is the next Jordan Peterson. This is the next Jordan Peterson. Going to sell millions of books, going to make you guys millions of dollars, getting millions of views on every video they post, but they've made the same criticisms Candace has made in the last 6 months. Does that person have a job?
Yeah, I'm not. Even this is too close to the Candace thing for me to speak to, because I feel like there are implications of this that I'm not willing to engage in. But if your question is, would I hire, would I hire Bill Whittle if Bill Whittle suddenly said that there's a genocide going on in Gaza? No, I don't think that that's a person that I would hire at the Daily Wire. That doesn't align with very core beliefs for me. I don't want to promote that idea in the world. Why would I give that guy my money? And you say make millions of dollars off of these guys as though these hosts generate money and I siphon it off the top. But that's, of course, not true. I'm an integral part in building the brands of these hosts, of promoting the brands of these hosts. I spend millions of dollars of marketing behind every one of my hosts. I lose a lot of money on my hosts for a long time. Even the ones that are very, very big often make no money at all and cost a lot of money for the first several years that I work with them. Why would I make investments in people if I largely disagree with some major part of their... in the same sense, I wouldn't hire a pro-choice person to work for me. Although, certainly there are conservatives out there who have spotless records on any number of other aspects of what I might consider the conservative platform. But why would I pay them when they go against something that I believe at a very deep level, which to me is a somewhat fundamental level? No, I would not.
Can I jump in here? I got something when, just kind of bring together what other people have been saying, because I've taken a back seat and kind of been listening. But I guess we are getting somewhere here with this process, which is, and it's funny because it echoes a conversation I had with Tyler Boyer. I had a Twitter space conversation with Tyler Boyer, who is the head of Turning Point Action, I believe. He's some high-ranking executive over at Turning Point, and he said something very similar. We got him to admit over the course of a little bit of a process that if someone is not pro-Israel, they can't be a Turning Point ambassador. And I said, well, what's the mission of Turning Point? He says, well, it's free markets, and lately we've changed it a little bit. I said, yeah, but it also seems to be that an integral part of the mission statement is that you're pro-Israel, and you, I think, honestly are admitting that, yes, it's republicanism, like small r republicanism, it's something like that. But it also seems to be supporting PragerU content and Daily Wire content. And, one article would be, here's the case for small government. One would be, here's the case for low taxes. Here's Thomas Sowell talking about the Laffer curve. And then an article would be like, here's why Palestine has never existed. You know, and then, you know, be there 3 more like, you know, regular conservative articles. And then there'd be another video that's like, here's why Israel gets to crush its enemies, you know? And I was like, well, that one of these things is obviously not like the other. A lot of these things are ideological, you know, and it's classical liberalism. And then there's like this very particular support for a particular country. And I think that only makes sense when you realize that, well, a lot of the people that are pushing this stuff, there's clearly a bias. You know, Joel Pollack, he left, what is it, Shabbat? There was some Jewish holiday on October 7th. He left to go on Twitter and say Palestine needs to be destroyed. And, you know, and he later apologized. But obviously, he feels strongly about that because he's Jewish. He studied Judaism at a Jewish university in South Africa. His wife converted to Judaism. So, of course, he feels strongly about Israel. But he's also the editor of Breitbart in America. Same is true of Prager. Same is true, I feel like, of Shapiro. And I guess the problem is, you know, look at what we're talking about right now. Candace Owens was let go. Well, I know you don't want to talk about that. So let's just say what you've said. You said that you would not hire somebody who is opposed to Israel. But Ben Shapiro, the flagship show on your publication, will not say Christ is king, will not say the words America first. So it's like Christ is king can be anti-Semitic. America first can be anti-Semitic. Those that don't support Israel have no home at Daily Wire. But yet, non-Christians have a home at Daily Wire. And it seems that Shapiro will collaborate with people like Dave Rubin, who are gay. And not only is Dave Rubin gay, but he also, like, and I don't know, this is a loaded term, but he paid a surrogate to have a child for him and his, quote, gay married husband. So, I mean, I think we're beginning to notice a pattern here, which is that this is a particular cause close to the hearts of a particular people who comprise a lot of the positions in conservative media. And it seems that if you go against that, you're not allowed. But, and this is in the broader space, if you are not Christian, if you are gay, if you are a feminist, if you are in favor of a number of other things, which is what Chief Trumpster was getting at, you do have a home. You're either hired, you can collaborate, you're greenlit. When I got booted from the Daily Wire circle by Cassie Dillon, who's here, and she apostatized from Christianity, which is unfortunate. When I got the boot, I went and created my own faction that said, no, the foundation is America first, Christ is king. If you can't say those things, if you don't say those things, you will not be hired. I don't hate you and you can do your own thing, but I'm not going to hire someone that won't say Christ is king in America first. And you have a movement where it's the reverse, where you're able to be gay, you're able to say, you know, hands up, don't nail. You're able to say Christ is a rebel who got killed for his trouble. You're not allowed to say that Israel's committing a genocide. And, you know, and I think you're sincere. I think you have an ideological conviction, and I actually understand how it follows, you know, which says that the Jews will only be safe if there's Israel. Israel can only be safe if it has freedom of action in its periphery. And even with other states like Iran, which are kind of relatively outside of its periphery. Therefore, if you don't support Israel prosecuting a war to the fullest extent against their adversaries, you know, you can work it back that, well, that's because you don't want Jews to be safe or exist. I think that's your sincere ideological commitment. I disagree with that. The Pope disagrees with that. Nearly every country in the world disagrees with that, as evidenced by how they vote at the United Nations. This administration disagrees with that, and most of Generation Z disagrees with that. So
well, luckily, Nick, we're America first.
Yeah,
we don't care what the rest of the world thinks.
Hey, Nick, I want to.
Well, but are all those people anti-Semites? I mean, because if you're saying that if you don't support Israel killing 25,000 civilians in Gaza, then, well, you know, you're anti-Semitic. I can't think of a person who believes that and isn't an anti-Semite.
No, I actually,
so that
I've
makes
actually thought
Francis.
of someone. It took me a minute, but I've thought
Okay.
of someone.
Who you
Mike
got?
of free speech absolutist Jews in the movement who are conservative, who are pro-Israel, who don't disavow people like you, who then get blacklisted by groups like Fox News or the Daily Wire and other conservative media outlets. And in 2017, when they had that play out of their way to specifically unperson and just like professionally blacklist any Jew that will refuse to disavow somebody like you, or any Jew that won't toe their adopted line. And like when I ran for Congress, for example, I just want to share my experience because it's hard to sometimes like break through and feel like you have a voice in this sphere, even as a pro-Israel Jew and as a free speech absolutist and as somebody who truly is America first, because there's this really toxic element within conservative media by Jews specifically. And I'm like calling out Ben Shapiro, I'm calling out Jeremy, because like I know for a fact I've been told like I'm not allowed to go on any Daily Wire shows because I'm on the Daily Wire blacklist. Same with Fox News. And I've never been anti-Israel, right? Like when I ran for Congress, Bibi Netanyahu's son literally was tweeting in support of me in my campaign. But I've been told, oh, because you refuse to disavow Nick Fuentes, you have no idea how many like Jewish organizations I've been disinvited from. I used to get invited to all the different, Jewish galas, not anymore. The ADL worked to ban my campaign ads when I ran for Congress. AIPAC campaigned against me. I'm Jewish, right? Like literally AIPAC gave money to my Christian opponent, okay, evangelical Christian opponent when I ran for Congress, as opposed to me, simply because I'm a free speech absolutist. So again, like there are people who don't have a problem with people saying Christ is king. I've attended AFPAC multiple times, as you know, Nick, you invited me, you gave me VIP, and people were shouting Christ is king. I have no problem with it. If I was a Christian, I'd probably say the same thing. I'm not a Christian. I don't get offended by people saying Christ is king. But what I do get offended by is Jews in the conservative media, non-Jews in the conservative media that want to go and try to blacklist people and professionally stunt them. For like 7 years now, this has been happening to people like me. And I just want to remind everyone, like to this day, I'm still banned everywhere. I only just got my X account back in December of 2022. I'm still banned on PayPal, Venmo, GoFundMe, Uber, Lyft. I'm not even allowed to order food on Uber Eats, banned on Clubhouse, banned on Instagram. Facebook designated me as a terrorist and then said it was okay for people to incite violence against me because they put me on the list. And it's like, for what? Right? For what? And then people like Ben Shapiro, who are Jewish, like distort the truth. And then not only will they not defend, people who actually are victims of real anti-Semitism, like Islamic inspired anti-Semitism, right? But then they'll manufacture claims of fake anti-Semitism to justify their professional blacklist. So I just kind of wanted to get Jeremy's take on this because like there's a lot of like victimhood complexes, it seems like from a lot of the people that work at Daily Wire, but you guys go out of your way to blacklist people. So maybe you can speak on your blacklist, Jeremy.
Yeah, happy to speak to that, and I probably only have about 5 minutes left. I'm old.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
I'm
of course.
and I don't
Of course.
do well.
Yeah, I've got to go, right?
There's not a blacklist at the Daily Wire.
There is, though. because I've been told that I'm not allowed to go on any Daily Wire shows. And then I was also told that there was an article that was written about me on Daily Wire when I was running for Congress, and then it was promptly deleted because I guess it got through somehow, and then it was deleted. So there is definitely a blacklist, right? Because
I've heard as well that there are people who are not allowed back at the Daily Wire. Like they've been told this. So there's definitely
and also I just want to know, like, I'm not trying to, I just think it's really interesting because, like, people generally classify, okay, you're Jewish or you're Christian, right? Well, what about the Jews that are free speech absolutists, the Jews that haven't condemned Nick Fuentes, and the Jews that are attacked by the ADL, and the Jews who aren't offended by Christ is King, and the Jews who have...
I love them.
Yeah, but no, I know that you don't have a problem with me, Nick. I don't have a problem with you either, but my issue is like, why is it that Nick and I are able to get along and I'm able to get invited to AFPAC by Nick Fuentes, who is supposedly like some, Nazi boogeyman, but then I'm blacklisted by Ben Shapiro and Jeremy Boring at the Daily Wire simply because of what? Like, I just really want to know, what crime did I commit? Because I was banned everywhere for calling Ilhan Omar anti-Jewish. And now because I refuse to say that Nick Fuentes and others should be sent to a digital gulag for the rest of their life, like, I have found myself professionally stunted and put on the Fox News blacklist. And that's not the only reason why, I'm sure, but I know specifically that this is something that Ben Shapiro has told people. He's told Jewish donors that I know. He's told several people that Laura Loomer is never allowed on Daily Wire. And I just want to know why. Like, as a pro-Israel, America First content creator, Jeremy, what is your issue with somebody like me who is Jewish?
Well, I would say a handful of things. One, I said early and would repeat here, I can't speak for Ben Shapiro. I don't know what Ben Shapiro has said to Jewish people about you. That's not in a frame of reference that I can speak to. I can't speak to whether or not Daily Wire hosts want to have you on their shows. I can't speak to that. I don't tell them who they interview. If I had the power of making them say and do only the things that I want them to say and do, my life would be much, much easier and I would die a happy man. That's not how the world works, obviously. If I owned Uber Eats, you'd be able to get a cheese. Well, you wouldn't need a cheeseburger. You're Jewish, but you'd be able to get a hamburger. I
don't keep kosher, but I just think it's really interesting that, I mean, Nick has a point in the sense that you'll have an organization like Daily Wire that will platform a transgender content creator or a homosexual content creator like a Dave Rubin that, paid for women to rent their wounds, right? So he could have a baby or two babies as a gay man. And then he blocked me on Twitter, by the way, for pointing that out. But then you won't actually allow for true America First conservatives. And it's funny, right? Like, President Trump voted for me, right? President Trump shares my content, yet for some reason, like, I don't know, what, am I not Jewish enough? Am I not the right type of Jew? Am I too much of a free speech absolutist? I say this as a America First Jewish conservative that has no problem with people saying Christ is King. I'm not offended if people say it. I've gone to church before with Christian friends. Like, I just wonder, like, what's the story? What is it boil down to, right? What's the real issue at Daily Wire? Because it's not just about this issue of people saying Christ is King. There's been a long-standing effort, and I can testify to this personally because I've been victimized by it at Daily Wire, to blacklist certain people, not just people who are anti-Israel, but people who actually are pro-Israel, who are free speech absolutists.
Instead of Jeremy giving another fake answer, let's just talk real. The Daily Wire is a soulless place for drones. That's why they can't make a good movie. That's why their film Lady Ballers is a disgusting Juana Man knockoff where they have men dressing as women, which is an abomination to God. Okay, the Daily Wire is for soulless people. All right, that's what it is. Laura, you have a soul. You're someone that loves humanity. The Daily Wire is the banality of evil. It's the definition of the banality of evil. It's occupying the space that people that love America should be in, and their media does nothing but line the pockets of Ben Shapiro and Jeremy Boring. They're the worst. They're the worst in conservative media. Let's call a spade a spade.
I want to tell a story before Jeremy
Laura,
gets off. And yeah, go ahead, Drew.
I have a real quick question for Jeremy because I have to go here in 2 minutes
and
as well.
I want to tell Jeremy a story before you ask that, because I want him to see something. Like, look, I don't agree with everything.
Wait, Laura,
This is
you've
about-
asked
this is
you've
about
asked
Nick.
Jeremy several questions
Yes,
at
but
this point. Can we let him respond?
He's not going to respond. He just said, as soon as I asked a question, he conveniently said, "Oh, I gotta go, right? Can't have the Jew that isn't offended by Christ as King, who won't disavow Nick Fuentes, put the Jew on
Laura,
the
you
spot,
have-
right?"
Well, Laura, my
would
question,
answer.
Laura, my question, I think will get to the heart of the matter, and the issue that you have as well. So, Laura, what I see going on here is you align with people like Nick Fuentes on occasion, and Nick Fuentes is persona non grata at the Daily Wire. I think this is related to why Candace was just fired, and probably why you are not welcome at their studios too. And this leads to my question, which is, Jeremy, one of the problems that I see in America, as we've been talking about through this entire conversation, is that conversation about Jews that puts them in a critical or negative light oftentimes gets shut down in America. A question that I have for you that's a follow-up to the ones that I asked before about the anti-Semitism laws is this: do you think that the term anti-Semitism is unfairly and dishonestly used to bludgeon people when they are leveraging honest criticism or asking honest questions about Israel, Judaism, or powerful Jews? Do you think that term anti-Semitism is dishonestly used to shut down valid criticisms and questions about Jewish people?
Just like I think that Christ is King is a true statement about the primacy of Jesus, but that the term Christ is King can be used to be any number of evil things, including an anti-Semitic troll. I also think that anti-Semitism is a very real thing and very much on display quite often in our society, and that anti-Semitism is also used as a false charge by bad actors to limit debate and legitimate criticism of Jewish individuals and the state of Israel. Yes.
So, okay, but you do, thank you for that answer, and you do believe that there is legitimate criticism and questions that can and ought to be asked about Jews or Israel or Jewish power or whatever. You do think that there is validity to some of that conversation.
There is certainly
not from a hateful place, but just from an objective, honest place.
Yes,
with American interests.
And I am going to wrap up with this last answer. Laura used my 5 minutes. I do want to just say, Laura, that if I ever start an interview show, I'll be happy to interview you at the Daily Wire. And whatever distaste people have for you, it isn't because of your free speech absolutism, and it isn't because of your Jewishness or some particular stripe of Jewishness. I don't know my Ashkenazi Seders from my Sephardic Seders, so I'm not qualified to speak into any of that. But I will say that you do engage in scorched earth political tactics, and so you shouldn't be surprised if other people take a scorched earth political view as well.
Ben Shapiro said Arabs like to live in sewage. How's that for scorched earth?
Ben Shapiro said that when he was very young, and he's retracted it and said that he regrets saying it. And
Oh, but was Laura young? Was Laura young when she did anything that you don't like?
I just said that I would interview her, buddy. I just said
wait, okay, Jeremy, I appreciate you saying that. Is there any chance that the public could also get an interview between Ben Shapiro and Nick Fuentes? Is there any possibility that could happen?
We will.
The public just got a debate between me and Nick Fuentes tonight. I feel like we've taken a huge step.
I agree. It's a really good step. Do you think there's a possibility we could broker something like that? Because I think that's a conversation America needs to hear.
I've said all along throughout the evening that I don't speak for Ben Shapiro or any of my hosts, but I would be absolutely thrilled to have Ben speak to Nick, or anyone who on my team who wants to speak to Nick or anyone else.
Yeah. And Jeremy, just to point on your point, just to kind of touch on your point lastly about scorched earth, surely you don't like the fact that Jews in Israel right now are being eradicated and erased. And I don't appreciate the feeling of being eradicated and erased by, supremacist content creators, people like you and Ben Shapiro at Daily Wire, people like Rupert Murdoch at Fox News that want to try to eradicate our voices. Okay. When you're basically sent to a digital gulag, that's a form of unpersoning. Okay. It's a form of as I wrote about in my book, I called it literally a digital Shoah. And so you have to use scorched earth tactics when people are literally trying to kill you off and debank you and shut you down. And
You should not be debanked. You should not have been kicked off of X. You shouldn't have been kicked off of Uber Eats. And whoever it was that said Lady Ballers is a bad movie is completely full of shit.
And neither
Wonderful.
should Nick Fuentes.
Thank you guys for
Neither
the
should
wonderful
Nick
conversation.
Fuentes.
Good
Neither
night.
should Nick Fuentes.
I mean,
No, nobody laughed at
Hey,
Lady Ballers,
Jeremy,
bro.
thank you
Nobody
for
laughed at Lady
the
Ballers.
conversation.
Laura, to
neither-
your point, I shared a clip of Nick Fuentes talking about the situation in Gaza. Lindsey Graham, I think, had basically just declared holy war in the Middle East, as Lindsey Graham does. And Nick, in that clip, was basically saying, pray for the Palestinians, pray for Israel. They have the right to defend themselves, but, women and children, the population, etc. It was very nuanced, not calling for violence, basically calling for peace. I got, I think, 4 phone calls that weekend from people in the conservative movement just for sharing a clip of him saying something very, very definitely much more reasonable than basically let's turn Gaza into a parking lot. I'm not friends with Nick. You are. I can only imagine the amount of blacklisting you must have gone through for that. And
But
I think
that's not
let's
even
be
why
real.
my blacklisting took place even before I knew Nick Fuentes. That's why I'm saying there's a hypocrisy here. I exposed Ilhan Omar for marrying her brother and exposed all of her anti-Israel and pro-Hamas stances before she was even elected to Congress. That's why I got banned everywhere. And then, I ended up meeting Nick several years later, but my bans and my blacklist had nothing to do with Nick. But now, right? People try to use it against me, and I've been disinvited and kind of disavowed by certain people in the Jewish community. I lost donors when I ran for Congress simply because I want to tell a story about Nick. When I ran for Congress, I ran twice. I remember the second time I ran, it was very close, and I'd actually won on election night, and then there was an infusion of mail-in ballots. And Nick drove on his birthday, 4 hours from Miami each way to the villages. And I will never forget this. I will never forget it. I was bawling my eyes out. I was crying. I was so upset because it was very hard running for Congress while being banned on all social media. The first deplatformed candidate in United States history. Daily Wire never helped me. Ben Shapiro never helped me, right? So when you talk about like how Jews stick together, I didn't get any help from any Jewish organizations. And I was at the time the youngest woman ever running for Congress. They could have had the youngest woman ever in Congress as a Jewish Republican with America First policies. But they decided to keep me blacklisted and demonized and call me anti-Muslim and all these names. But you know who did show up to my election night and gave me a hug when I was in the back room crying and told me everything was going to be okay? Nick Fuentes. So when people say he's like some evil person and they say, why won't you disavow him, Laura? And I've lost friends over this. Like there's people that will they don't support me anymore. I'm telling you, like I probably lost over $120,000 of donations for my campaign from donors that told me they weren't going to donate to me after I attended AFPAC. And I just said, he's nice to me. I judge people based off of the way that they treat me. And if he really honestly hated Jewish people, he wouldn't have driven 4 hours each way to come support me on election night. Some of the people that said they were my friends weren't even there, right? My best friend was there, of course. But Nick was there, and I didn't ask him to be there. He just came on his own. I was shocked. I was shocked to see him. And I think that he gets a lot of shit for being friends with me, and I get a lot of shit for refusing to disavow him. Just last week, there was a hit piece. But there's something to it. You don't have to necessarily be a groyper, right, to be shut down. You don't even have to be a Christian or somebody who says Christ is king to be maligned. There are a lot of Jews out there, and I just want people to hear this because unfortunately you have morons like Rabbi Shmuley and the ADL and people like that think they represent all Jews. There are Jews out there that have no problem with people saying Christ is king. There are Jews out there that think that the ADL should be designated as a terrorist organization. There are Jews out there like me who believe that AIPAC should have to register as a foreign lobby. Okay. There are people like that out there. There are people like that who campaigned on banning dual citizenship for members of Congress. And unfortunately, I feel like sometimes this is my biggest criticism. I feel like Zionists are sometimes conflated with globalists, and then we're all just mixed in as one big Jewish group. and it can be hurtful at times, right? And I try to have conversations with people privately about it and say, no, I think you have like a misunderstanding. But I don't think like being pro-Israel and being against
honestly, Laura, you know what the
being
solution is to
against
that?
being against a ceasefire makes you like anti-America first, because as I just said, like I have no problem with Nick as a person. I don't agree with everything that he says, but I'm sure he could testify to this as well. There's blacklisting that happens even if you are Jewish. They will go out of their way to ruin your life, even if you are Jewish, if you refuse to disavow certain people. It's just the truth.
Could I, if anything, like, because I think the biggest, like, one of the biggest takeaways from what Jeremy was talking about was that he's okay with someone being pro-LGBT at Daily Wire, and he would prefer that policy than somebody who's anti-Israel. If you're anti-Israel, then you can't work at Daily Wire. You can't
Yeah,
be
but if
part
you
of
are
that.
pro-Israel, you're still blacklisted, and we just got him to confirm it. And he clearly got so uncomfortable by the question that he said that he had to leave.
But I did want to go back to Stannis.
So I wish there was a way that I could leave and let you guys talk. I don't know if that's possible because I'm hosting. Is that possible?
Unfortunately, it is not
Leave your phone. Leave your phone in another room, Lauren. We got to keep going. Jeremy Boring just came here and tried to run damage control. That was the most disgusting thing I've seen in quite some time. Only reason Jeremy.
I did. If anything, wanted to go back to Stannis because a lot was talked about, and a lot. It was surprising that.
I'm tired. This has been so much fun. Thank you guys for tuning in. Until next time.
Laura, thank you for bringing everybody on this amazing panel. This was really.
Yeah.
I hope we do it again.
Good. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
joining.
Lauren. This was great. Lauren is queen.
Thank you.
All right, I'm here. Can you guys hear me? I'm here. I heard there were some sound glitches during the space. I'm sorry about that. I was running a whole bunch of different stuff on my computer, so I'm sure that didn't help. But what did you guys think? Did I do okay? Can you give me an assessment? How did I do? I was a little nervous. I'm gonna be honest. I was a little nervous. There were a lot of people listening. I did feel like I nailed Jeremy Boring's ass to the wall, though. I feel pretty good about that. I feel really good about nailing Jeremy Boring's ass to the wall. And I know, like, some people thought I was simping for Nick. It wasn't my intention to simp for Nick. It was just, like, I felt like everything I said was, like, factually accurate in regards to my experience. It was nothing I hadn't said before. And so I felt pretty good about that too. What do you guys think? I dropped a tactical nuke. I mean, my God. I was like, oh shit. I literally got Jeremy Boring to admit that anyone who is not pro-Israel can't work at the Daily Wire. Holy shit. I'm pretty pleased with myself. I'm kind of glad it was over though. Like, I know it could have kept going, but it's like been almost 4 hours, and I was like, oh God. Well, that's exactly it. It's like, you can make the argument that, yeah, I mean, you can make the argument that like Jeremy, it's his prerogative on who to hire, right? Like, it's his, like, whatever. If he wants to set a standard that you cannot work at the Daily Wire if you're not overtly pro-Israel, that's his business. But let's not pretend that the Daily Wire supports its hosts having free speech. Like that has been put to bed. There is no way. There is no way in this universe that Candace Owens was not explicitly fired because of her critiques of Israel. And now we know that even if Jeremy Boring had the most perfect candidate, the next Jordan Peterson, everything was just like on point, conservative values, like awesome track record, and that person made the same criticisms that Candace made of Israel, he wouldn't be hired. It's like they do not have free speech for their hosts. They tell their hosts what they can and cannot say. I think that was very, very clear. Yeah, I really tried to get as much about free speech as I could, but it was just like, I didn't expect it to be a Bible seminar for like the first 2 fucking hours. I was like, and you're allowed to like the Bible, you're allowed to be a Christian. I don't really care, but I was just like, I thought it was just such a stupid argument to make though. Like the reason we should be allowed to say Christ is king is because we're Christians and Christianity is awesome, bro. I mean, you're allowed to believe what you believe, but like a much better argument is, this is America. We have free speech. I don't really know what the problem is. You're allowed to believe things I don't believe. You're allowed to say things I don't agree with. I thought Lauren Chen did a great job. I thought she did just like a masterful job of pushing back at Jeremy. I loved, I thought Nick did a great job. The I don't know who that guy was, Sovereign, whatever, that Sovereign Bro guy. He was a little annoying to me, if I'm honest. He's like a little annoying, a little condescending, a little like, I was like, there were times I was definitely like, bro, can you shut up? Like Adam King, this is my first kind of like interaction with him. I kind of didn't really follow what he was saying. I thought Andrew, who I guess is Jewish, but really critical, I just thought he was a little belligerent. And listen, I'm like, it's not as though I'm not belligerent at times, like, right? But like, it was a little too belligerent for me. I love that Laura Loomer got in at the end to like nail Jeremy Boring's ass to the wall. I mean, can you imagine? I wonder what was going through Jeremy Boring's head. I wish I could have gotten Adam Green up. I tried to get Adam Green up. Adam Green was listening at first, and I suggested to Lauren Chen that she bring him up because I know explicitly what position Adam would have taken on it because I actually talked to him about it earlier today. But like, she thought I meant Adam King and not Adam Green. So, and then he left. I was like, no. This shall be forever known as the beginning of the redemption of Nick Fuentes. I mean, again, I feel like I really feel like I don't agree with a lot of the things Nick says. I just don't. I do not agree with him on so many things. But one of the reasons I'm very adamant about defending him is he has been raked over the goddamn coals by the conservative establishment from the time he was 18 years old. And I think that what's been done to him, oftentimes by people connected to the Daily Wire, is just not fair. It's not fair. It's not right. I said it on the space. I wish I had said this part more eloquently, but I hadn't kind of thought it through yet. So I was forming a thought in my head as I was speaking it out loud. But like, why aren't we going after the people that are being completely intellectually dishonest as harshly as we're going after anything that Nick says? Most of the time, Nick is joking. He's funny. I'm sorry. He is. And so, like, why aren't we going after Ben Shapiro to be like, why are you dragging an 18-year-old? He's fucking 18. Like, this is stupid. This is a retarded use of resources. Why aren't we going after Andrew Klavan to be like, why are you dedicating all your resources to taking down a 25-year-old? Why is the entire conservative establishment mobilizing around someone saying Christ is king? And yeah, is he doing it in a trolly way? Of course he's fucking doing it in a trolling way. He's a pain in the ass. The Groypers are a pain in the ass. I'm sorry, Groypers, but it's true. You're all a pain in the ass, okay? But like, nothing they're doing is evil. Nothing they're doing is violent. They're fucking around on the internet. And they've got the conservative establishment so teed up that they're going, like, he's 25 years old. So stupid. So dumb. Guess I got my answer, LOL. Hey, by the way, great question, Jeremy. Yeah, I'm pretty happy about that. I really wanted to like craft questions that like he had to give me a yes or no answer to. He couldn't go on a fucking story. He couldn't deflect like yes or effing no. I loved how he pretended he didn't understand my hypothetical question. Cause he was trying to figure out a way to answer it that wasn't going to give it away. Daily Wire should have hired me as a journalist. Should have happened. No, I never would have gone to work for the Daily Wire. That wouldn't have happened. Anyway, that's all I really have, guys. It's midnight, so I'm gonna shut off the stream. Oh, that's really nice. Let me take a screenshot so I can tweet this later. But that was fun. I hope you guys had fun. Again, I apologize to the people who were on my community Zoom earlier that I had to leave early. Oh, yeah. And Carrie Smith never showed. Oh, too bad, so sad. Carrie apparently had a podcast that was much more important to go on. And Carrie didn't get to be in the 9,000 person Twitter space questioning Jeremy Boring tonight. And I'm sure Carrie's going to be crying into her pillow and blaming me for that, being like, that bitch, if that bitch wasn't in that space, I would have gone in that space. And whatever. Too bad, so sad. She chickened out. James Lindsay chickened out. And Lauren Chen even mentioned this. She couldn't get anyone to come on and defend the position of Christ as King as anti-Semitic. Whatever. It's officially the midnight hour. I'm logging off. Thank you guys for hanging out. We'll see you tomorrow. Take care. We'll see you soon. Bye.